Have you ever gone through a breakup that felt like something straight out of a movie? That heart-pounding, gut-wrenching moment when everything changes and you're left wondering how things could possibly get weirder. Well, what if I told you that some breakups don't just feel like fiction, they surpass it in ways so bizarre, so utterly unbelievable that you'll question whether they could even happen in real life? Today, we're diving deep into the 33 weirdest American breakup stories, tales so strange they blur the line between reality and absurdity, proving that sometimes truth isn't just stranger than fiction, it's downright jaw-dropping. From coast to coast, these stories capture the raw, unpredictable, and often hilarious chaos of human relationships unraveling in the most unexpected ways. Imagine discovering your partner has been secretly living a double life, not with another person, but with a collection of garden gnomes they talk to every night. Or picture receiving a breakup text that's actually a detailed spreadsheet analyzing your compatibility scores over the past 6 months. These aren't plot twists from a quirky indie film. These are real moments that real people have lived through, each one a testament to the incredible creativity and sometimes pure madness that emerges when love goes off the rails. What makes these stories uniquely American? It's that bold, larger-than-life spirit where anything seems possible, even when it involves breakups that involve subpoenas, public spectacles, or bizarre rituals performed under the full moon. We're about to embark on a journey through heartbreak like you've never seen it before, where emotions run high, logic takes a backseat, and the outcomes are so wildly unpredictable you'll be left shaking your head in disbelief. So get comfortable, open your mind to the extraordinary, and prepare to explore the moments when breaking up isn't just hard to do, it's downright unbelievable. Our first story takes us back to a time before smartphones and social media, to an era when the morning newspaper was the primary source of news for most families. Imagine a man, let's call him Robert, sitting at his kitchen table one ordinary morning. The smell of fresh coffee fills the air as he unfolds the local paper, scanning the headlines before turning to the sections he always checks: sports, maybe the comics. On this particular day, his eyes drift over to the classifieds. It's a section filled with lost pets, used furniture for sale, and legal notices. His gaze freezes. There, nestled between a notice for a public hearing and an auction announcement, is his own name. Not just his name, but his full name and the name of his wife, listed as the petitioner in a case for the dissolution of marriage. In that cold, impersonal block of newsprint, he discovers his wife is divorcing him. The entire town, everyone who reads that paper, now has a front row seat to the most intimate and painful collapse of his life. The shock is absolute, a physical blow. The public humiliation is instantaneous. His private heartbreak is now a matter of public record, available for the price of a quarter. This method, known as service by publication, was once a surprisingly common, if brutally impersonal, legal procedure. It was a last resort used by courts when one spouse could not be located to be personally served with divorce papers. Perhaps they had left town, avoiding the process altogether. The thinking was that publishing the notice in a newspaper of general circulation in the area constituted a reasonable effort to inform them. But can you imagine the sheer, devastating impact of finding out this way? There's no gentle conversation, no private letter, no chance for a face-to-face discussion. The end of a marriage, a partnership built on years of shared history, is reduced to a few lines of text next to ads for lawnmowers and apartment rentals. It treats the most significant relationship in a person's life with a staggering lack of ceremony. For Robert, and for countless others who lived through this experience, the memory of that moment, the feel of the newsprint, the sound of the page turning, likely haunts them far more than any angry argument ever could. It wasn't just a breakup, it was a profound and very public erasure. While the public newspaper divorce is a story of cold, impersonal finality, our next tale is one of pure, unfiltered chaos. It proves that when a heart is broken, some people don't just want to quietly move on, they want to orchestrate a spectacle so grand, it becomes legend. This is the story of what happens when a breakup isn't just announced, but is literally set free to roam the streets. The setup is almost a cliché, a passionate relationship between two animal lovers. One of them, a dedicated and somewhat eccentric collector of exotic pets, had turned their home into a private menagerie. We're talking about creatures you wouldn't find at your average pet store: a sizable python, a talkative parrot with a surprisingly extensive vocabulary, a few finches with brilliantly colored plumage, and a mischievous capuchin monkey that was known to untie shoelaces. Their partner tolerated this unusual domestic life, perhaps even found it charming at first, but when the relationship suddenly and bitterly ended, that tolerance curdled into something far more destructive. The jilted lover was left alone in the house they once shared, surrounded by the very symbols of their ex's passion. Every squawk, every slither was a reminder of the life that was now gone. And instead of mourning quietly, they hatched a plan of spectacular revenge. They didn't just want to hurt their former partner, they wanted to create a problem of such monumental proportions that it would be impossible to ignore. So, one evening, they loaded all of the cages and terrariums into a van and drove to the city's central zoo. Under the cover of darkness, they didn't just abandon the animals at the gate. They proceeded to open every single enclosure and release the creatures into the zoo's meticulously managed ecosystem. Imagine the scene the next morning. Zookeepers arriving for work to find a python curiously investigating the lion exhibit, a capuchin monkey happily raiding the snack stand, and a brightly colored parrot perched high above the giraffes, loudly offering critiques of the entire operation. The immediate response was a city-wide animal alert. Sections of the zoo were shut down, local news stations broke in with frantic reports about dangerous exotic animals on the loose, and a team of veterinarians and animal control officers launched a full-scale hunt. The chaos was absolute, a public safety crisis born from a very private heartache. The legal repercussions, as you can imagine, were severe and swift. The vengeful ex was quickly identified and faced a litany of charges far beyond simple trespassing. We're talking about criminal mischief on a massive scale, endangering public safety, and a host of violations related to the illegal release of non-native species into a controlled environment. The financial cost of the recovery effort and the temporary closure of the zoo likely resulted in a lawsuit for damages that would haunt them for years. But the most fascinating reaction was arguably that of the ex-partner, the animal collector. Upon hearing the news, their primary emotion wasn't anger over the destruction of property or the invasion of their home. It was sheer, unadulterated panic for the well-being of their beloved pets. Their revenge-seeking ex had, ironically, struck the one nerve that guaranteed maximum emotional devastation, creating a scenario where worry completely overshadowed any sense of victory or spite. If the animal release was an act of covert chaos, our next story represents the polar opposite, a breakup so brazenly public it couldn't be ignored. This is the tale of the billboard breakup, a masterclass in using public space for private vengeance. We move from the hidden corners of a zoo at night to the blazing sunlight of a major interstate, where one scorned lover decided that a simple conversation was far too intimate for their needs. Picture the morning commute. Cars are bumper to bumper, people are sipping coffee, listening to the radio, completely absorbed in their own worlds. Then they look up. On a massive digital billboard towering over the traffic, the usual ad for a local mattress sale or a fast food chain has been replaced by something entirely different. In bold, impossible to miss letters, it reads, "Jason, I'm dumping you. Your snoring is unbearable and your lazy ass never did the dishes. It's over." Sarah, for one person in that sea of cars, the world must have shrunk to that single, humiliating message. For everyone else, it was the most entertaining traffic jam of their lives. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. Renting a billboard requires planning, negotiation, and a not insignificant amount of cash. The person behind this, let's call her Sarah, had to cold call advertising companies, choose the perfect high-traffic location, design the artwork, and approve the final proof, all while nursing a broken heart and meticulously plotting this very public ambush. It's a staggering level of commitment to pettiness. The message itself is a fascinating artifact. By including specific, mundane grievances like snoring and dirty dishes, Sarah wasn't just announcing a split. She was airing the couple's most private, everyday frustrations for an audience of thousands. She weaponized the ordinary, turning minor domestic annoyances into a billboard-sized indictment of her partner's character. The public fallout was immediate and viral. Before Jason had even likely seen the sign himself, photos of it were flooding social media. Local news stations picked up the story, turning a personal spat into a light-hearted human interest piece. Talk show hosts probably made jokes about it. Jason was suddenly infamous, his personal failings the subject of water-cooler discussions across the city. The concept of airing dirty laundry was elevated to a monumental scale, transforming a highway into the world's most exposed clothesline. While some might have seen it as a hilarious power move, it raises profound questions about the boundaries of heartbreak. When does the desire for catharsis cross the line into public harassment? The billboard, though temporary, created a permanent digital scar on that relationship, ensuring that its end would be remembered not for what it was, but for how spectacularly it was announced. While public humiliation on a highway billboard is certainly a bold statement, our next story takes the concept of declaring someone dead to you to a shockingly literal and legally perilous level. This is the tale of the fake obituary, a move that swaps public spectacle for something far more sinister and psychologically complex. Imagine the quiet ritual of reading the Sunday paper. For many, flipping to the obituary section is a somber act, a moment to remember community members who have passed and to offer condolences to grieving families. Now picture a woman, we'll call her Diane, engaging in this weekly tradition only to come face to face with her own name. There, in black and white, is a detailed announcement of her death. It lists her age, her hometown, and even includes a few heartfelt sentences about her supposed passions and the family she left behind. But the final line is the real gut punch. It concludes with the phrase, "She will be missed by some, but is finally dead to me." The signature is that of her recent ex-partner. The initial shock is just the first wave. Then comes the frantic ringing of the phone. Concerned friends and distant relatives who still read the physical paper begin calling, their voices a mixture of confusion and panic. "Are you okay?" they ask. "We saw the notice. What on earth is happening?" Diane is suddenly thrust into the exhausting and emotionally draining position of having to assure everyone she is, in fact, alive and well. She has to prove her own existence while simultaneously grappling with the profound violation of having her life symbolically ended in a public forum. The emotional cruelty of this act is almost surgical in its precision. It's not just an insult, it's a complete existential erasure, a malicious attempt to cancel someone's very being in the eyes of their community. For the ex-partner who placed the ad, this likely felt like the ultimate word in their argument, a final, devastating mic drop. But they fundamentally misunderstood the gravity of the platform they were exploiting. An obituary isn't just a classified ad. In the public consciousness, it is a sacred space for memorializing a life. Hijacking that space for a personal vendetta is a violation that transcends mere poor taste. It disrupts the social order and weaponizes collective grief. The community's trust in that section of the newspaper is broken, and the emotional distress caused to the victim and their family is immense and lasting. This is where a deeply personal act of spite collides with the cold, hard reality of the law. While the ex might have viewed it as a darkly humorous prank, the legal system sees it very differently. Publishing a false obituary, especially one that causes measurable harm, can open the door to serious legal consequences, most notably a lawsuit for defamation. Defamation law exists to protect a person's reputation from false statements that cause harm. What could be more harmful than falsely telling the world someone is dead? The victim could potentially claim damages for the emotional distress, the damage to their reputation, and even any financial losses incurred, perhaps if a client or employer saw the notice and severed ties. Beyond civil court, the perpetrator could also face criminal charges like harassment or falsifying public documents, turning their moment of petty revenge into a life-altering legal nightmare. The fake obituary is a stark reminder that when a breakup pushes someone over the edge, the fallout can extend far beyond broken hearts into broken laws. While the fake obituary was a quiet, deeply personal violation, our next story explodes into the public eye with all the subtlety of a bomb blast at the most carefully orchestrated event of a person's life, their own wedding. This is the tale of wedding cake sabotage, an act of revenge so perfectly timed and brutally public that it didn't just end a relationship, it immortalized its collapse in a viral video seen by millions. Picture the scene: a beautiful ceremony has just concluded. The bride and groom, let's call them Chloe and Mark, are radiant, floating on a cloud of joy and relief. The reception is in full swing. Laughter and music fill the air. Friends and family are toasting to a lifetime of happiness. All eyes are on the couple as they approach the towering, meticulously decorated wedding cake, a symbol of their sweet new beginning. The photographer is poised, ready to capture the classic shot of their first slice together. But as the caterer wheels the cake forward for its grand reveal, the festive atmosphere shatters. Perched on top of the pristine white frosting is not the elegant figurine of a bride and groom that Chloe had personally chosen. In its place is a crude, hastily assembled new scene. The groom figurine is now standing between two bride figurines, and tucked into the frosting beside it is a small, printed photograph, a selfie of Mark, unmistakably intimate with another woman. The silence is absolute for a single, deafening second before the gasps begin. Chloe's face transforms from blissful confusion to dawning horror, then to white-hot rage. She turns to Mark, whose own face has drained of all color, a portrait of guilt caught in the spotlight. He has no words, no defense. The truth is right there, baked into the very center of their celebration. In that moment, the entire narrative of their relationship is rewritten. Every promise, every vow is rendered meaningless by the evidence presented on a dessert platter. This wasn't a private confrontation or a whispered accusation. It was a truth delivered in the most humiliating way possible, in front of everyone they loved. The mastermind behind this elaborate ambush was the other woman. She wasn't just a secret, she was someone who had discovered she was part of a much larger deception. Upon learning that the man she was involved with was not only engaged but literally hours away from marrying someone else, her heartbreak fermented into a need for a reckoning that he could not ignore or explain away. She had to get into the reception, find a moment alone with the cake, and execute her plan with nerves of steel, all while surrounded by the very family and friends she was about to devastate. Her goal wasn't just to stop the wedding, it was to make sure its collapse was so spectacular, so public, and so undeniably his fault that there would be no path to reconciliation, no way to spin the story. She wanted to hold a mirror up to his duplicity and force everyone to look. And of course, in the age of smartphones, someone was recording. The video didn't just capture the initial reveal, it captured the entire, brutal unraveling. Chloe's tear-streaked, furious face, the groom's stammering attempts at denial that no one believed, the gasps and shouts from the guests, the bride's mother rushing to her side. It was a raw, messy, human drama unfolding in real time. That clip was uploaded to the internet and spread like wildfire. It was picked up by gossip blogs, talk shows, and news outlets, turning a deeply personal trauma into global entertainment. The public dissection was merciless. comment sections filled with opinions on everyone involved, villainizing the groom, sympathizing with the bride, and debating the ethics of the other woman's shocking method. For Chloe, the pain of the betrayal was now compounded by the agony of public pity. She couldn't grieve in private. Her humiliation was a meme, her heartbreak a topic for water-cooler discussion. For Mark, his reputation was instantly and permanently destroyed, both personally and professionally, as the video followed him everywhere. And for the other woman, while she may have felt a fleeting sense of justice, her actions also defined her in the public eye in a way that would be difficult to escape. The wedding cake, meant to be a symbol of unity and celebration, became instead a monument to deceit and the terrifying power of a revenge served not cold but frozen in buttercream and broadcast to the world. But if you think the wedding cake caper was a public spectacle, our next story shows how a bitter breakup can invade not just a physical space, but the very digital world we live in. We've all heard tales of exes posting unflattering pictures or sending angry messages, but this is a story of digital sabotage on an industrial scale, a complete and total takeover of someone's online identity. Imagine waking up one morning and grabbing your phone, a daily ritual as normal as breathing. You tap the icon for your favorite social media app, expecting the usual stream of memes and vacation photos from friends. Instead, you're met with a tidal wave of notifications. Dozens of direct messages, comments, and tags are flooding in, all with a tone of confusion or outright shock. Your heart starts to pound as you scroll through your own profile. It's been transformed. Your profile picture has been changed to something deeply unflattering. Your bio now contains a shocking and entirely fictional confession of a personal failing. But the real horror is in the posts themselves. Someone has used your account in your voice to publish a series of brutally honest and completely fabricated breakup announcements. These aren't simple messages saying it's over. They are detailed, humiliating inventories of your supposed shortcomings as a partner, peppered with embarrassing personal anecdotes that only an ex would know. They've tagged your family, your co-workers, and your closest friends, ensuring the absolute widest possible audience for this character assassination. In the span of a few hours, your entire digital life, the carefully curated persona you present to the world, has been hijacked and turned into a weapon against you. The sense of violation is absolute. This is more than just a hacked password. It's a hostile takeover of your social self. The perpetrator, of course, is the ex-partner. They used intimate knowledge, perhaps a shared computer or a password you foolishly reused, to gain access. Their goal wasn't just to hurt you privately, it was to socially isolate you, to poison every well of your personal and professional life at once. They wanted to make you a pariah in your own social circle, to force you to spend the coming weeks and months not healing from the breakup, but constantly apologizing and explaining that you were hacked. It's a revenge tactic designed for the modern age, leveraging our deepest dependency on these digital platforms for connection and validation. The fallout is a uniquely 21st century nightmare. Beyond the initial humiliation, there's the frantic damage control. You have to contact every platform support team to plead your case and try to regain control of your accounts. You have to send out mass messages to your contact list, a humiliating process in itself, clarifying that those posts were not from you. You have to look your boss in the eye on a Zoom call and explain why there's a post on the company's feed alleging you have a strange fear of staplers. The emotional toll is compounded by a real, tangible professional and social cost. Trust is eroded, relationships are strained, and the digital ghost of that malicious act can linger in search results for years, a permanent stain on your online reputation that no amount of explaining can fully erase. This act moves far beyond simple heartbreak into the realm of serious cybercrime. Unauthorized access to a computer system, which includes social media accounts, is a federal offense. The ex could be facing not just a messy social situation, but actual criminal charges, fines, and even jail time. Furthermore, the victim has a very strong case for a civil lawsuit around intentional infliction of emotional distress, defamation, and invasion of privacy. The hacker believed they were operating in a consequence-free zone of digital spite, but in reality, they were creating an extensive legal paper trail that could follow them for a lifetime, proving that in the digital world, revenge is never as anonymous as it seems. While we often think of a breakup as an emotional severing, our next story reveals how it can also become a terrifyingly practical dismantling of a person's entire life. This is the harrowing account of what happens when a vengeful ex doesn't just want to break your heart, they want to break your credit score, your reputation, and your very sense of security. It's a tale of stolen identity, a form of revenge that feels less like a crime of passion and more like a cold, calculated assassination of someone's financial future. Imagine the first signs, which are always small and easy to dismiss. A piece of mail arrives for you from a department store you haven't shopped at in years. It's a pre-approved credit card offer, and you simply toss it into the recycling, thinking nothing of it. A week later, you get a call from a bank you don't have an account with, asking to verify some unusual activity. You assume it's a phishing scam and hang up. The warning signs are there, but they're whispers in a noisy world. Then, the whispers become a roar. You sit down to pay your bills online and can't log into your main bank account. The password has been changed. A cold dread begins to creep up your spine. You call the bank's customer service line, and after navigating a maze of automated options, you finally reach a human being. They inform you that your account has been flagged for suspicious activity, including several large cash advance requests. As they read off the list of recent transactions, your blood runs cold. None of them are yours. This is the moment the nightmare becomes real. You aren't just being hacked, you are being impersonated. Someone has taken the intimate knowledge gained from a shared life, your social security number, your mother's maiden name, the answer to your security question about your first pet, and is using it to systematically build a new, fraudulent version of you. They are applying for credit cards, taking out short-term loans, and even filing fraudulent tax returns, all in your name. The perpetrator isn't a shadowy figure from the dark web. It's the person who used to know the sound of your breathing as you fell asleep. They know your routines, your personal history, the very data points that institutions use to verify your identity. They are the perfect imposter. The motivation here is often a toxic cocktail of revenge and entitlement. The ex-partner might feel wronged, believing they are somehow owed something, money, a sense of power, or simply the satisfaction of watching you suffer. They rationalize their actions by telling themselves you deserved it, that this financial ruin is merely payback for the emotional pain you caused them. It's a devastatingly efficient form of attack because it operates on two fronts: the immediate financial devastation and the long, grinding war of attrition required to fix it. The process of reclaiming your identity is a bureaucratic odyssey of monumental frustration. It starts with the endless phone calls to credit bureaus, to banks, to card companies, to the police. Each call requires you to prove you are who you say you are, a bizarrely difficult task when someone has so thoroughly poisoned your financial profile. You have to place fraud alerts and freeze your credit, which, while necessary, adds another layer of complexity to your own life anytime you need to apply for legitimate credit. You spend hours filling out affidavits, writing dispute letters, and compiling evidence that you are the victim. The emotional toll is immense. Every letter in the mail becomes a source of anxiety. Every unknown phone number could be another collector. The trust you once had in the systems that are supposed to protect you evaporates, replaced by a constant, low-grade paranoia. And the damage isn't just financial. Your reputation takes a direct hit. Potential landlords run credit checks and see a history of defaults and delinquencies, making it impossible to rent a new apartment. Employers, especially in finance or government sectors, might rescind a job offer upon seeing a background check riddled with red flags. You are suddenly guilty until proven innocent in the eyes of countless automated systems, and proving your innocence is a slow, manual, and soul-crushing process that can take years to fully resolve. The ex's revenge creates a shadow version of you that haunts your every move, a ghost of bad debt and broken promises that you alone must exercise. Legally, the repercussions for the identity thief are severe. This moves far beyond a civil dispute into the realm of serious felony charges. We're talking about wire fraud, mail fraud, identity theft, and computer fraud, each charge carrying the potential for significant prison time and hefty fines. The victim's path, while arduous, is clear. Work with law enforcement to provide the evidence, and the legal system can deliver a form of justice. But no prison sentence can ever give back the hundreds of hours spent on the phone, the sleepless nights worrying about the next piece of bad news, or the fundamental sense of safety that was stolen along with that identity. This kind of breakup story is a chilling reminder that the most dangerous weapon an ex can wield isn't anger, it's intimacy. And if you thought financial sabotage was a chillingly impersonal way to inflict lasting harm, our next story proves that some acts of revenge reach beyond the world of the living, targeting the most permanent of plans. This is the deeply unsettling tale of the cemetery plot revenge, a maneuver that takes a final, sacred promise and twists it into a weapon of pure spite. For many couples deeply in love, planning a future together isn't just about buying a house or discussing retirement. It's about a commitment so absolute it encompasses the very end of life itself. Purchasing adjoining cemetery plots is a profound gesture, a final promise to remain side by side for eternity. It's a decision born from a place of ultimate security and tenderness, a quiet agreement that says, "No matter what, I will always be with you." Now imagine that bond shattering. The relationship ends not with a quiet understanding but with bitterness and anger. And in the aftermath of that emotional wreckage, one partner makes a decision that is both petty and profoundly cruel. They still legally own that small, designated piece of land meant for their eternal rest, so they decide to sell it. The act itself is deceptively simple. They might place an ad online or contact the cemetery directly, offering the plot for sale. They aren't just selling a piece of property, they are selling a promise. They are commodifying a shared dream and handing it over to a complete stranger, forever severing that physical connection. The motivation is a dark need to have the absolute last word, a way to assert a final, unchangeable control over a shared history. It's the ultimate, "you can't be with me, even in death." The revenger ensures their ex-partner is not just alone in the present, but symbolically alone forever, their carefully considered plans for peace and reunion utterly destroyed. The moment of discovery for the victim is unlike any other kind of breakup shock. It likely doesn't happen in the immediate, raw aftermath of the split. It might be months or even years later, perhaps after the dust has settled and they are trying to move on. They might be reviewing their own will or final arrangements, a somber but necessary task, and decide to double-check the details of the plot deed. Or they might receive a startling letter from the cemetery administration informing them of the change of ownership. The realization dawns slowly, a cold, creeping dread. The spot they had visited, perhaps placed flowers on, and mentally reserved as their own final sanctuary is gone. It now belongs to someone else, a stranger whose name is now permanently etched on the deed where theirs once was. The emotional violation is staggering. It feels less like a property dispute and more like a spiritual eviction. This form of revenge is uniquely macabre because it weaponizes mortality itself. It exploits a universal vulnerability, the human desire for peace, closure, and a dignified end. The perpetrator isn't just causing temporary embarrassment or financial strain. They are inflicting a lasting wound that preys on the most fundamental human anxieties about death and legacy. It forces the victim to confront their own mortality all over again, not with the comfort of a plan, but with the jarring reality of a new, unsettling uncertainty. Where will they be laid to rest? Will they be alone? The simple, comforting plan they had is replaced with a daunting and emotionally exhausting task to be undertaken, often while still grieving the relationship itself. Legally, the situation is usually clear-cut. If the plot was solely in the name of the ex who sold it, the act, however cruel, is perfectly within their rights as the property owner. The victim has little to no legal recourse unless there was a specific written agreement stating otherwise. This legal clarity only adds to the sense of helplessness and injustice. The law protects the act of selling the property, but it is utterly silent on the profound emotional cruelty behind the sale. It's a stark reminder that the legal system is designed to handle facts and deeds, not the sanctity of broken promises or the emotional weight of a planned eternity together. The revenge is therefore complete, lasting, and almost entirely unpunishable, leaving a wound that, for the victim, truly will last forever. But if the cemetery plot revenge feels like a quiet, posthumous cruelty, our next story explodes in the bright, harsh lights of the corporate boardroom. This is a tale of ambition, love, and betrayal on a scale worthy of a premium television drama. The hostile corporate takeover where a business built together becomes the ultimate prize in a vicious personal war. The foundation of this story is a classic power couple narrative. Two brilliant, driven individuals meet, fall in love, and decide to channel that intense energy into a shared vision. They become co-founders, pouring their savings, their sleepless nights, and their entire identities into building a company from the ground up. Their strengths are perfectly complementary. Perhaps one is the creative visionary, the charismatic face of the brand, while the other is the operational mastermind, the one who understands the intricate flow of cash and contracts. For years, this partnership is their greatest asset, both romantically and professionally. The business is their baby, a physical manifestation of their love and shared ambition. The lines between life and work blur completely. Their dinner table conversations are strategy sessions, their vacations are working retreats, and their dreams for the future are inextricably linked to the company's soaring valuation. Then the relationship fractures. The pressure cooker environment that once fueled their passion now amplifies every disagreement. Personal resentments begin to poison business decisions. An argument over whose turn it is to do the dishes evolves into a bitter dispute over the company's marketing budget. The trust that was the bedrock of both their marriage and their corporate structure begins to crumble. The breakup, when it finally happens, is not just a personal catastrophe, it's a corporate governance crisis. They are still legally bound together as business partners, forced to sit across from each other in the same glass-walled conference room where they once dreamed up their empire. For one partner, the one we might call the strategist, the bitterness doesn't lead to a desire for a clean break. It curdles into a cold, calculating need for total victory. They don't just want to win the breakup, they want to acquire their ex, to seize control of the very thing that represents their shared identity and claim it solely for themselves. They begin to plot a move straight out of a Wall Street thriller, a hostile takeover. This requires meticulous, secret planning. They might start quietly buying up small amounts of company stock from early, disgruntled investors. They court members of the board of directors, strategically poisoning the well against their ex-partner, painting them as emotionally volatile, a creative diva who is bad for business, or an operational loose cannon who is driving the company toward ruin. They use their intimate knowledge of their ex's weaknesses, a short temper in meetings, a tendency to miss minor deadlines, as evidence of professional incompetence. The final act is a masterstroke of corporate ruthlessness. They call a special meeting of the board, leveraging the support they've secretly garnered. The other partner arrives, perhaps expecting another tense negotiation about buyout terms, completely unaware that their fate has already been decided. In a stark, professionally worded resolution, the board swayed by the strategist's calculated campaign votes to remove their ex from their executive position. The company they named together, whose logo they designed on a napkin, whose first office was their garage, now formally ousts them. Security is called to escort them from the building. They are handed a cardboard box for their personal effects and walked out the door, their keycard deactivated before they even reach the parking lot. The legal severance might be generous, but it's a pittance compared to the emotional value of what was just stolen. The aftermath is a special kind of hell. The ousted founder has to watch from the sidelines as their life's work is reshaped in their ex's image. Their name is gradually scrubbed from the company's Our Story page. Their visionary ideas are implemented without their guidance, often poorly. The business press speculates wildly about the sudden departure, and the victorious ex might even give interviews subtly reinforcing the narrative of the troublesome co-founder. The personal betrayal is magnified by a profound professional grief. It's not just the loss of a relationship, but the loss of a legacy. They are a ghost in their own machine, erased from the very history they wrote. This story is the ultimate warning about mixing love and business, a chilling lesson that when a shared dream dies, the fight over its corpse can be more brutal than the heartbreak itself. But for some couples, the most heated battles aren't fought over real estate or retirement accounts, but over the one member of the family who offers unconditional love, the family pet. This leads us to the surreal and emotionally charged world of the pet custody battle, a legal arena where the lines between property and family member become dangerously blurred. In one particularly grueling case, a couple's separation escalated into a full-scale war over their beloved golden retriever, a dog named Samson. What began as a simple disagreement over who would keep him spiraled into a years-long court proceeding that would cost them more than the dog's weight in gold, financially and emotionally. This wasn't a simple matter of who bought the food or who took him for more walks. This was a fight for a shared heart, and neither side was willing to surrender. The legal system in most states is not equipped to handle this kind of emotional dispute. The law, in its cold, clinical language, still classifies pets as personal property, no different from a couch or a coffee table. But try telling that to someone who has shared their bed with a living, breathing creature for a decade. The couple in this case refused to accept that classification. They weren't fighting over an asset, they were fighting over family, and so they weaponized the legal system, each hiring high-powered attorneys specializing in, well, nothing this specific actually exists, so they hired divorce attorneys and demanded they treat Samson like a child. The legal filings became increasingly absurd and heart-wrenching. One partner submitted as evidence a meticulously kept log of all the vet appointments they had attended, arguing it proved a deeper level of care. The other presented sworn affidavits from neighbors testifying to the strong bond they shared with the dog during their evening walks. This is where the situation veered into territory once reserved for the most contentious human custody cases. The judge, perhaps in an attempt to find a rational solution in an irrational conflict, ordered the appointment of a pet custody evaluator. Yes, that is a real, albeit niche, profession. This individual made home visits to each partner's new residence, assessing the environment for its pet suitability. Was there a fenced yard? Were there safe, quiet spaces for the dog to rest? The evaluator even observed the interactions between each human and the dog, taking notes on body language and responsiveness to commands. But the couple didn't stop there. Determined to win, one of them hired an animal psychologist, another very real expert, to essentially interview the dog. The theory was that by observing Samson's behavior with each parent, the psychologist could determine which home he was happier in and which human he had a stronger bond with. The entire endeavor was a fascinating and tragic attempt to force a non-verbal animal to choose sides in a human conflict it could never possibly understand. The financial cost was staggering. Between the lawyer's fees, the evaluator's bill, and the animal psychologist sessions, the couple collectively spent over $50,000 on this battle. That's enough money to fund a small animal shelter for a year, all spent on determining the fate of a single dog. The emotional cost, however, was immeasurable. Every court date, every document filed, was a fresh reopening of the emotional wounds of the breakup. The fight over the dog became a proxy war for all the pain, resentment, and unmet needs of the failed relationship. Winning custody wasn't just about getting the dog. It was about winning the breakup, about proving to themselves and their ex that they were the more loving, more responsible, more deserving person. Samson, the innocent animal at the center of it all, was no longer just a beloved pet. He had been transformed into the ultimate pawn, a furry symbol of victory in a war he never signed up for. While corporate takeovers and pet custody battles play out in courtrooms and boardrooms, our next story takes the concept of post-breakup retribution into a far more primal and superstitious realm. This is the unsettling account of the voodoo doll revenge, a story where heartbreak curdles not into a legal strategy, but into something much darker and more visceral. Imagine the simple, everyday act of checking your mail. You sift through the usual stack of bills and advertisements, your mind already on the evening ahead. Then your fingers brush against a small, lumpy parcel with no return address. The packaging is plain, almost deliberately anonymous. A prickle of curiosity mixes with a faint sense of unease. You tear it open, and there, nestled in a bed of crumpled paper, is a small, crudely fashioned doll. It's made of dark fabric, roughly stitched together, with two ominous black buttons for eyes. Stuck into its torso are several long, sharp pins. Tucked beside it is a single, handwritten note with a message that chills you to the bone. Every pin is for the pain you caused. May you feel it 1,000 times over. The initial reaction is a surreal mix of disbelief and creeping dread. Your rational mind knows it's just cloth and thread, a meaningless object. But the symbolic violence of the gesture bypasses logic and taps directly into a deep, ancient part of the human psyche that fears the unseen and the malicious. This isn't just an angry letter, it's a performed Chinese letter, a ritualized wish for harm. The pins aren't just pins, they are a physical representation of the pain the sender wants to inflict. The doll itself is a grotesque effigy, a stand-in for you, created with the explicit purpose of channeling negative energy. The ex-partner who crafted and sent this package wasn't just trying to communicate their anger, they were attempting to weaponize superstition, to instill a fear that would linger long after the initial shock faded. For the recipient, the psychological impact is uniquely disturbing. Every minor ache, every passing headache, every moment of bad luck that follows can be unfairly, illogically linked back to that horrible little doll. It plants a seed of magical thinking that can be incredibly difficult to uproot, turning ordinary life into a minefield of anxiety. Is that sudden back pain just from sleeping wrong, or is it something more? The object's power isn't in any real supernatural force, but in its ability to hijack the recipient's own mind, making them complicit in their own unease. It's a form of psychological terrorism designed to make a person feel hunted and vulnerable in their own skin. From a legal standpoint, however, the courts deal in facts, not fears. While the sender might have viewed it as a darkly creative prank or a cathartic act of symbolic revenge, the law sees it very differently. The victim, after the initial shock wears off, is entirely within their rights to take the doll and the note directly to the police station and file a report for harassment. The doll itself is considered a credible threat. It crosses a clear line from mere unpleasantness into behavior that is intentionally alarming and threatening. A prosecutor would argue that any reasonable person receiving such a package would feel genuinely threatened and distressed. The specific laws invoked can vary, but they often fall under statutes against malicious harassment or cyberstalking if there were accompanying digital messages, with the core charge being the intentional infliction of emotional distress. The legal outcome hinges on the concept of a credible threat. The prosecutor must convince a judge or jury that the doll and note were not just in poor taste, but were a genuine communication of a wish to cause harm, one that made the victim fear for their safety. The anonymous nature of the package only adds to the menace, as it implies the sender could be anyone, anywhere, watching. In many cases, even if a conviction for a more serious charge is difficult to obtain, a judge will readily issue a restraining order based on this kind of evidence. The act of sending the doll provides all the proof needed to demonstrate a pattern of harassment and a willingness to engage in bizarre and threatening behavior. This legal paper trail is crucial as it officially documents the incident and creates consequences for the sender, establishing a boundary that their superstitious retaliation has very real-world repercussions. It serves as a stark reminder that when you mail your anger to someone's doorstep, the return address is often a courtroom. While the voodoo doll played on primal fears and superstition, our next story centers on a form of theft that is far more concrete and personally devastating. This is the calculated act of holding someone's past hostage, of seizing not just an object but a tangible piece of their family history. We've all heard of bitter disputes over who gets the TV or the nicer set of dishes, but this is a tale that moves beyond the material value of things and into the profound emotional weight of an heirloom. Picture a simple, handcrafted locket. It's not made of particularly valuable materials, perhaps just silver and a small, flawed gemstone, but its worth is incalculable. It was passed down from a grandmother to a mother, and then on a significant birthday from that mother to her daughter. It's more than jewelry, it's a physical tether to generations of love, resilience, and shared history. For the woman who owned it, let's call her Elena, it was her most cherished possession, a touchstone she would hold during times of stress or sadness, a reminder of where she came from and the strong women who paved her way. She kept it in a small wooden box on her dresser, a place of honor in the home she shared with her partner. When their relationship ended, the split was messy and filled with resentment over finances. They weren't married, so the division of their shared life was a confusing and emotional free-for-all. As they navigated the difficult process of separating their belongings, Elena's ex-partner, Mark, grew increasingly angry about what he perceived as an unfair split. He felt she was taking things that were theirs and claiming them as hers. In his mind, he was owed more, and then he noticed the locket. He saw the reverence with which Elena handled it, the way her voice softened when she spoke of it. He recognized its power not as a financial asset but as an emotional one, and in a moment of cold, calculated spite, he decided to steal its power for himself. During one of his final trips to the house to collect his things, while Elena was distracted in another room, he slipped the locket from its box and into his pocket. It was a quick, silent act of theft. Elena didn't discover it was missing until days later, after he was gone, and the house felt emptier than ever. The initial feeling was a panicked, sickening emptiness. She tore the bedroom apart, convinced it had simply been misplaced in the chaos of moving. But as the reality set in, a cold dread replaced the panic. She knew. She immediately called Mark, her voice trembling. He didn't deny it. Instead, his tone was chillingly calm and transactional. He laid out his terms. He would return the locket unharmed if she agreed to his terms on their financial settlement. He wanted her to relinquish her claim to their shared savings account, a sum of money that represented years of her own contributions and sacrifices. He was holding her family history ransom for cash. The emotional violence of this exchange is difficult to overstate. He wasn't just stealing an object, he was holding her grandmother's memory, her mother's love, and her own sense of identity as collateral in a financial negotiation. He was weaponizing her grief and her deepest sentimental attachments against her. For Elena, the choice was a torturous paradox. Agreeing to his demands meant rewarding extortion and losing financial security she had rightfully earned. Fighting him meant potentially never seeing the locket again, a loss that felt like a second, deeper death in her family. It was a choice no one should ever have to make. This scenario forces a brutal confrontation between the legal and the personal. In the eyes of the law, the locket is personal property and its theft is a criminal act. Elena could and absolutely should have gone to the police. Theft is theft, and attempting to use stolen property as leverage in a civil dispute only adds charges like extortion to the list. A detective showing up at Mark's door would have likely ended the standoff immediately, but the emotional calculus for a victim in this situation is never that simple. There's a paralyzing fear that involving the police will escalate the situation, that an angry ex might damage or destroy the heirloom out of spite before it can be recovered. The threat isn't just "you won't get it back," it's "I will destroy it and you will never have even the pieces." This fear of permanent loss often keeps victims negotiating with a terrorist of their own past, trying to reason with someone who has already demonstrated a profound lack of empathy or ethics. Ultimately, the story of the stolen heirloom is about the cruel understanding that some people possess, that the most effective leverage in a conflict isn't taken from a bank account but from the heart. It reveals a terrifyingly pragmatic form of malice, where an opponent bypasses arguments over fairness and goes straight for the one thing they know you cannot replace, turning your own history into a weapon against you and ensuring that the end of the relationship poisons your connection to everything that came before it. But if holding an heirloom ransom represents a theft of the past, our next story involves the elaborate fabrication of a future that never was. This is the psychologically complex and deeply manipulative tale of the fake pregnancy, a desperate gambit where one person, terrified of being abandoned, constructs an entire fictional reality to trap their partner, only to have the entire intricate lie come crashing down in the most dramatic way possible. The setup is a relationship that has long been running on fumes. One partner, let's call him Alex, has come to the difficult but firm realization that the love is gone. The connection has faded, and after many sleepless nights, he knows he needs to end things. He musters his courage and prepares for that painful conversation. But when he sits his partner, Chloe, down to talk, he is completely blindsided. Before he can even get his carefully rehearsed words out, she delivers her own stunning news. Through what seem like genuine tears of joy, she tells him she's pregnant. It's a masterful deflection, a tactical nuclear option deployed to stop a breakup in its tracks. The announcement instantly reframes the entire conversation. Alex's planned discussion about incompatibility and unhappiness is immediately shelved. How can you break up with someone who is carrying your child? His own needs and desires are suddenly vaporized, replaced by an overwhelming sense of duty, obligation, and sheer panic. For Chloe, the lie is born from a place of absolute terror. The fear of abandonment is so powerful that her mind justifies creating an immensely complex deception. She isn't necessarily a malicious person. She is a desperate one, willing to say or do anything to postpone the pain of rejection. She understands the powerful biological and social programming that surrounds pregnancy. It's the ultimate trump card, a guarantee of attention, care, and most importantly, a temporary stay of execution for the relationship. In the days and weeks that follow, she builds upon the lie with frightening detail. She might fake morning sickness, carefully timing her retching sounds for the bathroom each morning. She could use a photo from the internet of a positive pregnancy test, or even obtain a real one from a friend. She might start discussing baby names, picking out nursery colors, and talking about how excited her mother will be. Each layer of the fiction makes it more real, both for Alex and for herself, pulling him deeper into a web of obligation and trapping herself in a corner of her own making. The partner on the receiving end of this deception, Alex, is living in a special kind of hell. Any lingering doubts about the breakup are now drowned out by a roaring sense of responsibility. He feels trapped, obligated to stay in a relationship that makes him deeply unhappy because of the new life that is supposedly on the way. His own grief over the end of the relationship is complicated by a confusing mix of anticipation and dread. He might throw himself into the role of the expectant father, buying prenatal vitamins and reading parenting books, all while a quiet voice in the back of his mind is screaming in protest. The cognitive dissonance is immense, trying to force feelings of joy and excitement to cover up a deep-seated unhappiness and a sense of being ensnared. Of course, a lie of this magnitude has an expiration date. The due date on the calendar keeps getting closer, and Chloe has to constantly innovate to explain away the lack of a growing belly. She might claim the doctor said she's just carrying small, or that she has a tilted uterus that hides the pregnancy. She might fake a miscarriage scare to buy more time and sympathy. But the pressure is immense and unsustainable. The confrontation typically happens in one of two ways. Perhaps Alex's family, growing excited about a grandchild, buys a gift for the baby shower, a tangible onesie or a stuffed animal. The act of holding that small, real object in his hands might finally snap Alex out of the fog, forcing him to confront the utter lack of physical evidence and demand to see a doctor's report. Or more tragically, he might discover the truth by accident, finding a hidden stash of period products or stumbling upon an internet search for how to fake a pregnancy left open on a shared computer. The moment the lie unravels is never quiet. It's a volcanic eruption of pent-up emotion. For Alex, the initial shock gives way to a torrent of rage, betrayal, and profound relief, all mixed into one overwhelming wave. The weight of months of obligation and anxiety lifts in an instant, only to be replaced by the crushing realization that he was manipulated on the most intimate level possible. The relationship he thought he was saving never even existed. For Chloe, the confrontation is a moment of total exposure and collapse. The elaborate fiction she has painstakingly maintained comes crashing down, and she is left naked with her fear and shame. The very thing she was trying to avoid, the end of the relationship and the abandonment, is now guaranteed, and it arrives with a level of anger and mistrust that far exceeds a simple breakup. The fallout is catastrophic for any possibility of a civil future. Trust isn't just broken, it is annihilated. Alex is left to question every single memory and interaction from the entire duration of the deception, wondering what was real and what was a calculated performance. He has to untangle himself not just from a partner, but from the ghost of a child that never was, a process that involves its own unique form of grief. For Chloe, the consequences extend beyond the loss of the relationship. If the lie was exposed to friends and family, she faces social ostracization and a reputation as unstable and manipulative. The fake pregnancy is a story that follows a person, a scarlet letter of emotional desperation that can poison future relationships before they even begin. It's a stark lesson that using the promise of life to avoid dealing with loss only guarantees a much deeper and more devastating destruction. Of course, when a relationship is headed for the rocks, people will often reach for any excuse to avoid the uncomfortable truth, but few have the audacity to look their partner in the eye and blame it on a higher power from a higher dimension. This brings us to the story of the alien abduction excuse, a breakup tale so creatively unhinged it borders on performance art. Imagine the scene. A couple is having a perfectly normal dinner, maybe discussing their day or making plans for the weekend. The conversation lulls and one partner takes a deep breath, their expression turning strangely serene yet deadly serious. They explain that they have something monumental to share, something that will change everything. They lean in and reveal that they haven't been entirely honest lately. They haven't been cheating or falling out of love in the conventional sense. Instead, they've been contacted. Not by an old flame, but by a non-terrestrial intelligence, they proceed to spin an elaborate yarn about a series of vivid, waking dreams and strange occurrences: lights in the sky, missing time, a mysterious humming sound only they can hear. They claim that during these episodes they have been communing with beings from a distant star system, entities of pure energy and profound wisdom. And these beings, they explain with a straight face, have given them an ultimatum. They have been chosen, singled out from all of humanity for a sacred mission, to depart Earth and journey to the home world of these advanced creatures. It is a one-way trip, a calling they cannot refuse for the betterment of all consciousness. Therefore, with a heavy heart but a spirit destined for the stars, they must end their relationship. It's not you, it's the entire cosmos. The sheer brilliance of this excuse lies in its utter uncontestability. How does one argue with that? You can't prove they weren't chosen by aliens. Any attempt to reason with them, to suggest perhaps they see a therapist or consider the stress they've been under at work, is immediately framed as a failure to understand their cosmic destiny. You are suddenly cast in the role of the narrow-minded skeptic, the anchor holding back a celestial traveler from their true purpose. The person delivering this news often does so with a placid, almost beatific acceptance, as if they've already mentally checked out of Earth's atmosphere and are merely tidying up their terrestrial affairs. They might even express pity for their earthbound partner, who is doomed to remain on this primitive planet while they ascend to a higher plane of existence. This kind of exit strategy is the nuclear option of avoidance. It's not just a white lie. It's a full-blown science fiction narrative constructed to provide an escape hatch from emotional accountability. The perpetrator isn't just trying to let their partner down easy. They are attempting to elevate the breakup to a mythological event, transforming themselves from a mere heartbreaker into a tragic, chosen hero compelled by forces beyond their control. It's a way to sidestep any messy conversations about their own feelings, failings, or desires. There's no room for "can we work on this" when the problem is literally galactic in scale. The relationship isn't ending because of incompatibility or unhappiness. It's ending because the universe itself has issued a decree. For the person on the receiving end, the experience is a surreal cocktail of confusion, hurt, and outright bewilderment. The initial reaction is likely stunned silence, followed by a frantic mental scramble to determine if this is an elaborate joke. But when the storyteller's face remains deadly serious, a strange inversion occurs. The victim's pain and anger are suddenly complicated by a genuine concern for their ex-partner's mental well-being. Are they having a psychotic break? Is this a sign of a brain tumor? The natural human response to a crisis to offer help and support is completely short-circuited by the sheer absurdity of the premise. You can't exactly offer to drive them to a doctor's appointment for their impending alien abduction. Ultimately, the alien excuse is less about the aliens and more about the profound cowardice it masks. It reveals a person so terrified of confrontation and so unwilling to be the bad guy that they would rather invent an entire interstellar drama than simply say, "I'm not happy anymore." It's a final act of science fiction that leaves the discarded partner not with a clean break, but with a lingering, unresolved mystery and a story so bizarre they can never truly tell it without sounding insane themselves. The breakup becomes a UFO sighting of the heart, an unexplainable event that leaves you questioning your own sanity, forever wondering if you were lied to with breathtaking creativity, or if you just dated someone who was genuinely beamed up and never came back the same. While some breakups unfold in the quiet privacy of a home, others are staged for an audience of millions under the blinding glare of television lights. This is the story of the reality TV breakup, a modern-day gladiatorial spectacle where raw human emotion becomes a product, and the collapse of a relationship is manipulated into must-see entertainment. Picture a couple, let's call them Jake and Chloe, who entered a popular dating show genuinely hoping to strengthen their bond. They were sold a dream by producers, an all-expenses-paid retreat where they could work on their issues with the help of experts, all while enjoying a luxury vacation. What they didn't understand was that they weren't participants, they were raw material. The experts weren't there to fix them, they were there to provoke them. The luxurious villa wasn't a sanctuary, it was a beautifully decorated pressure cooker designed to explode. The manipulation began subtly. Producers would pull each of them aside for individual confessionals, asking leading questions designed to seed doubt and amplify minor insecurities. Do you ever feel like Jake isn't really listening to you? A producer might ask Chloe. When Chloe gets emotional, does it make you want to shut down? They'd suggest to Jake. These conversations were then edited and shown back to the other partner, creating a distorted funhouse mirror version of their relationship where every private thought was weaponized. The environment itself was engineered for conflict, sleep deprivation from long filming hours, isolation from friends and family, and a constant supply of alcohol loosened inhibitions and heightened emotions. The producers weren't interested in a healthy resolution. They were chasing crescendo, a dramatic climax that would guarantee a ratings spike and water cooler chatter the next morning. The final act was meticulously orchestrated. Jake and Chloe were ushered into the show's iconic breakup suite, a room they were told was for final make-or-break conversations. What they didn't know was that the entire scene was being guided by a producer whispering directions into their earpieces. The conversation was steered toward their most sensitive, unresolved issues. Just as Jake began to get defensive, the host made a dramatic entrance, armed with a carefully edited video package of their worst moments together, clips selected not for accuracy but for maximum impact. As the couple watched their relationship's greatest failures played back on a giant screen, the humiliation was absolute. The host then turned to them and asked the question the entire season had been building toward. Based on everything you've seen and heard here tonight, do you think this relationship can be saved? In that moment, under the heat of the lights and the weight of the manipulated narrative, Jake snapped. The months of pressure, the feeling of being constantly watched and judged, and the pain of seeing their private struggles turned into public entertainment boiled over. He didn't just decide to end the relationship, he did it with a fiery, dramatic monitor directly into the camera, unleashing a torrent of anger meant for the producers onto his now ex-girlfriend. The cameras lingered on Chloe's devastated, tear-streaked face as the host offered a solemn, yet perfectly delivered, sound bite about the tragic end of a journey. The scene was television gold. For the network, it was a triumph. For Jake and Chloe, it was a trauma. The aftermath was a special kind of hell. The episode aired to massive ratings, and the clip of their explosive breakup went viral. Suddenly, they were both minor celebrities, but for the worst moment of their lives. Jake was villainized online as a heartless monster, while Chloe was pitied as a helpless victim. Memes were made from their most vulnerable expressions. They had to navigate the real-world grief of their ended relationship while simultaneously managing their new, unwanted public personas. Every date in the future would be preceded by a Google search that would bring up that infamous clip. They were forever frozen in the public consciousness, not as whole people, but as characters in a melodrama they never signed up to star in. Their real, complex emotions had been reduced to a simple plotline, and the most intimate fracture of their lives became nothing more than a few minutes of entertainment for strangers, a stark reminder that when love becomes a commodity, its death is often the most valuable product of all. But if the alien abduction excuse was a flight of fancy designed to avoid confrontation, our next story is a chilling example of what happens when an argument escalates into a terrifying act of physical entrapment. This is the harrowing account of the locked-in closet, a moment of rage so profound it crossed the line from a heated disagreement into a serious crime. It all began with a common yet volatile domestic dispute, A couple, deeply entrenched in a circular argument that had been building for hours, found themselves in the heat of the moment. Voices were raised, accusations were flung, and rational thought was completely abandoned. In a flash of blinding anger, one partner saw a chance not just to win the argument, but to completely end it. As their significant other stepped into the bedroom closet to grab a sweater, perhaps seeking a moment of comfort or simply to create some physical distance, the idea snapped into place. In one swift, shocking motion, they slammed the closet door shut and used their body weight to hold it closed. The initial reaction from inside was likely a mix of surprise and annoyance, a demand to stop playing around and let them out. But that demand quickly turned to panic as they heard the unmistakable sound of a chair being wedged firmly under the door handle, effectively turning the simple piece of furniture into a barricade. The pounding on the door began in earnest, the shouts turning from anger to pure, unadulterated fear. The person on the outside, still riding a wave of adrenaline and spite, shouted back a final, devastating retort. They declared the argument over and with a cold finality announced they were leaving for the weekend to finally get some peace and quiet, and then they actually did it. They walked out of the apartment, got in their car, and drove away, leaving their partner trapped in a dark, confined space with no way to escape. What follows is a nightmare of isolation and escalating terror. The initial anger gives way to a dawning horror as the trapped individual realizes this is not a joke. The closet, once just a place for clothes, becomes a prison. The air grows stale, the darkness is absolute, the only sounds are their own frantic breathing and the pounding of their heart. They scream for help until their voice is hoarse, but in a modern apartment building with thick walls, the chances of anyone hearing are slim. The passing of time becomes agonizingly slow, marked only by the fading light under the door as day turns to night. Basic human needs, water, a bathroom, become urgent crises. The mind begins to play tricks, conjuring fears of suffocation, of being forgotten, of this becoming their tomb. This is no longer a relationship problem, it is a fight for basic survival. Meanwhile, the person who left is living in a completely different reality. They might be at a friend's cabin or a hotel, initially feeling a twisted sense of victory and relief. They've silenced the argument, claimed their space, and taught their partner a lesson. But as hours turn into a full day, that smugness would inevitably curdle into a gnawing anxiety. The reality of what they've done begins to sink in. The question shifts from "did I win?" to "what have I done?" But instead of turning the car around, the sheer magnitude of their crime might paralyze them with fear of the consequences, leading them to double down on their disastrous decision. Salvation, when it finally comes, is not from the perpetrator's remorse but from the vigilance of others. In this case, it was a neighbor. After hearing faint, persistent noises of distress for an unnaturally long time, they grew concerned enough to investigate. Perhaps they called the apartment and got no answer. Maybe they knocked on the door and heard the desperate cries for help from within. They made the critical decision to call the police. Officers arriving on the scene would have been met with a bizarre situation, a seemingly empty apartment with sounds of a person trapped inside. Forcing entry, they would have found the barricaded closet and freed the victim, who was likely dehydrated, terrified, and in a state of profound shock. For the person who was trapped, the emotional and psychological scars would be deep and lasting, a form of claustrophobic trauma that could haunt them for years. But for the one who left, the real consequences were just beginning. When they eventually returned, perhaps expecting to find a chastened and apologetic partner, they were instead met by law enforcement. The charge was not just assault or harassment, it was false imprisonment, a serious felony. The legal definition involves intentionally and unlawfully restraining another person against their will, and barricading someone in a closet for an entire weekend is a textbook case. The prosecutor would argue that the perpetrator's actions were not a momentary lapse in judgment but a deliberate sequence of choices. barricading the door, ignoring the pleas, leaving the premises, and remaining away for an extended period with full knowledge of the situation they had created. The fallout in court would be severe. A conviction for false imprisonment can carry significant prison time, hefty fines, and a permanent felony record that would impact employment, housing, and future relationships for the rest of their life. The defense might try to argue it was a prank gone wrong or that the perpetrator never intended to be gone for so long, but a jury would likely see through that. The act of driving away for a weekend demonstrates a chilling level of premeditation and callous disregard for human safety. This story stands as one of the most extreme examples of how a breakup can spiral into criminality, proving that when rage overrides humanity, the price of a momentary victory can be a lifetime of consequences. Now let's shift from the terrifying physical entrapment of a locked closet to a story that traps someone in a legal and emotional maze of greed and deception. This is the saga of the stolen lottery winnings, a tale where a shared dream of incredible fortune curdles into one of the most profound betrayals imaginable. Imagine the euphoric high of a life-altering event. A couple, let's call them Lisa and David, have been playing the same lottery numbers for years, a little ritual that represents their shared hope for a future without financial worry. One evening, they sit on their couch watching the numbers roll across the television screen, idly checking their ticket. The first number matches, then the second. A flutter of excitement turns into stunned disbelief as one by one, every single number aligns. They've done it, they've won. The jackpot is a life-changing $20 million. The immediate reaction is pure, unadulterated joy, screaming, crying, hugging, making frantic phone calls to family. In that moment, the win feels like a testament to their partnership, a reward for their shared journey. They carefully sign the back of the ticket together and place it in what they believe is a secure spot, a locked drawer in their home office, already dreaming of houses, vacations, and a secure future for their children. But as the initial shock wears off, a subtle shift occurs in one partner's mindset. For David, the sheer magnitude of the money begins to warp his perception. The hour in our winnings slowly starts to morph into mine. Old resentments he didn't even know he had begun to surface. Maybe he felt he worked harder or that he contributed more financially over the years. Perhaps the relationship had already been showing quiet signs of strain, and this windfall looked less like a shared blessing and more like a golden ticket to freedom, a freedom he wouldn't have to share. He starts to fantasize about a life alone with that money, unencumbered by compromise. The locked drawer that once symbolized shared security starts to look like a prison holding his personal fortune. And so he hatches a plan. During a moment when Lisa is out of the house, he retrieves the ticket, but he doesn't cash it. Instead, he takes it to a safety deposit box at a bank she doesn't know about, renting it under only his name. He then carefully replaces the original ticket in the drawer with a forgery, a fake ticket with the same numbers but on a different date, knowing it's worthless. The breakup itself happens swiftly and, from Lisa's perspective, inexplicably. Just days after the win, David becomes distant, then confrontational, picking fights over trivial things. He announces he's unhappy and wants to end the relationship. Lisa is devastated but still buoyed by the knowledge of their shared fortune. She assumes they will at least navigate the separation amicably, dividing their massive new asset fairly. It's only when she goes to retrieve the ticket to contact lottery officials that she discovers the horrible truth. The ticket in the drawer is a fake. Her blood runs cold. She confronts David, who coolly, calmly denies any knowledge. He claims that must have been the only ticket, that perhaps she's misremembering, that the winning ticket was always his alone, purchased on a different day. The man she built a life with looks her in the eye and gaslights her about a $20 million reality they both experienced together. What follows is a legal battle of epic proportions, a forensic dissection of a relationship turned crime scene. Lisa's attorney must prove that the ticket was a shared asset purchased with shared funds, which is a common legal principle for married couples but can be murkier for unmarried partners. The case becomes a spectacle. They subpoena convenience store security footage, hoping to catch a glimpse of them buying the ticket together. They analyze their bank records for the withdrawal of the exact cash amount needed for the ticket. They call upon friends and family as witnesses to testify about the couple's long-standing habit of playing the lottery together. The entire intimate history of their relationship is put on display in a sterile courtroom, all to prove a simple truth that David is now vehemently denying. The emotional toll for Lisa is unimaginable. She is not only grieving the end of her relationship, but also fighting for a future that was stolen from her by the person she trusted most. Every day in court is a fresh betrayal as she watches David's attorney paint her as a gold digger trying to steal his legitimate winnings. The case likely ends in a settlement, a fraction of the original jackpot, but the victory is hollow. The legal fees are astronomical, and the money is forever tainted by the bitterness of the fight. The real loss isn't the millions, it's the complete and utter annihilation of trust. David, even if he keeps most of the money, gains a fortune but loses his integrity, forever known as the man who stole from his own partner. Their story becomes a cautionary tale about how the prospect of limitless wealth can reveal the absolute limit of a person's character, proving that the biggest lottery win can't buy you a clean conscience or a peaceful night's sleep. And so we see that even the most sacred of trusts can be shattered by greed. But what happens when the weapon of choice isn't theft but fear itself? How do you fight an enemy who isn't trying to steal your property, but to make it utterly unsellable, to trap you in a financial prison of their own making using nothing more than whispers and a few well-placed spooks? This is the story of the Haunted House Revenge, a campaign of psychological sabotage so bizarre it feels like a plot from a Gothic novel. The setup is a classic American dream turned nightmare. A couple buys a house together, a fixer-upper they pour their sweat, their savings, and their shared dreams into. They spend years renovating it, making it a home, a testament to their partnership. But when that partnership dissolves, the house becomes the ultimate symbol of their entrapment. They agree to sell it and split the proceeds for a clean break. But for one partner, a clean break isn't enough. The bitterness over the time and money invested curdles into a need for total control. They can't stop the sale legally, so they decide to poison the well. They realize that in the world of real estate, perception is everything. A house isn't just wood and nails, it's a story, and they are about to write a horror story. The plan is executed with a chilling, methodical precision. It begins subtly with the laying of groundwork. The vengeful ex starts spreading a carefully crafted rumor through local community forums, neighborhood Facebook groups, and even casual conversations at the grocery store. They don't scream ghost, they use more plausible, insidious details. They might mention that the previous owner was an eccentric old woman who died alone in the house, or that they themselves experienced unexplainable cold spots in the master bedroom. They seed doubt and unease, creating a narrative that the house has a history. They understand that a potential buyer's imagination is far more powerful than any special effect. Then comes phase 2, the production. This is where the X moves from rumor to reality, hiring a handful of aspiring actors or bored college students for a truly unique gig. Their job isn't to be seen, but to be heard and felt. They are given a script and a schedule, coordinating with the listing agents' showing times. As a prospective buyer tours the home, admiring the renovated kitchen, a faint, eerie child's laugh might drift down from the empty second floor. A door on the third floor, which the real estate agent knows was left open, is found firmly closed. During an open house, a motion-activated speaker hidden in the HVAC system might trigger a low, mournful groan just as a couple is peering into the basement. The actors are never seen. Their presence is only felt through these small, unsettling disturbances. the impact on the home sale is immediate and devastating. Potential buyers, already subconsciously primed by the online rumors, experience these events and their rational minds quickly crumble. The house doesn't feel like a dream home, it feels wrong. Offers that were once imminent are suddenly withdrawn with vague excuses. The prices dropped again and again, but the property gains a reputation. It becomes the creepy house on the hill, the one that's stigmatized. The ex-partner still living there is left utterly bewildered. They know the house isn't haunted. They renovated every inch of it, but they can't prove a negative. They are forced to sit in the home they built, watching its value plummet as it fails to sell month after month, becoming a prison of their former partner's making. This form of revenge is a masterclass in psychological warfare. It's not a direct attack, it's a gaslighting campaign on a grand scale. The victim is made to feel powerless and crazy, fighting an enemy they can't see against accusations they can't disprove. The ex's goal isn't just financial, it's to inflict maximum frustration and a sense of helplessness, to demonstrate that even after the breakup, they still hold the power to control their former partner's life from the shadows. The ultimate cruelty is that the victim is left holding the deed to an asset that has been effectively cursed, not by a spirit but by the lasting malice of a broken heart. For a while, it was the perfect partnership, a recipe for success that was the envy of the local food scene. He was the artist, a chef with magic in his hands, the one who could turn simple ingredients into culinary masterpieces. She was the engine, the business brain with a dazzling smile who handled the finances, managed the social media, and charmed every customer in line. Together, they were the Rolling Feast, a vibrant food truck known for its legendary Korean-Mexican fusion tacos and a line that regularly stretched around the block. Their relationship was baked into the very brand. Customers didn't just come for the food, they came for the show, the visible chemistry of a couple deeply in love and building their dream together, one serving of kimchi quesadillas at a time. But behind the shiny stainless steel counter, the pressure cooker of a small business began to strain their romance. The argument started small, simmering like a low heat. He felt she was too focused on the bottom line, constantly nagging him about food costs. She felt he was an artiste who didn't understand that passion doesn't pay the propane bill. The close quarters of the truck, once their cozy love nest, became a claustrophobic arena for resentment. The final fight wasn't about another person, it was about the business itself. It was a blistering shouting match over the right price to charge for a side of gochujang fries. A dispute so ludicrously petty that it finally exposed the rot at the core of their relationship. In a fit of rage, she screamed that she was done, and he, with equal fury, told her to get out. The next morning, she arrived at their shared commercial kitchen space, key in hand, ready to have the painful but necessary conversation about how to dissolve their business. But the space where the Rolling Feast was always parked was empty. A cold dread washed over her. She called him. No answer. She called again and again, her confusion rapidly turning into panic. It was a local food blogger who finally broke the news, sending her a link to a brand new Instagram account. The profile picture was unmistakable, their truck. But the name was new, painted hastily over their old logo. It was now called Soul Man Tacos, and the first post was a picture of their signature bulgogi beef taco, with a caption announcing the grand opening of his new solo venture at a different part across town. He hadn't just ended their relationship, he had stolen their life's work and driven away with it. The war began that very day. From his new location, he sold the exact same menu, using the recipes they had developed together. The very recipes she had meticulously written down in a notebook he now claimed were his intellectual property. She was left with nothing but a mountain of shared debt and a broken heart, but she wasn't defeated, she was ignited. Using her business savvy, she secured a loan, bought a new, bigger truck, and launched her own venture, the Phoenix Fryer. She didn't replicate their old menu, she weaponized her knowledge of it. She created new, improved versions of their classic dishes, publicly calling them the recipe perfected. She knew his every weakness, every corner he might cut under pressure, and she made sure her offerings were consistently better, her lines moving faster, her social media presence sharper and more engaged. The local media feasted on the drama. The story of the dueling food trucks was simply too delicious to ignore. A local news station did a feature, playfully dubbing it the Taco Wars. The segment featured interviews with both of them, each telling their side of the story to a reporter who could barely conceal their delight. Food critics began reviewing them against each other, and bloggers hosted taste tests to crown the ultimate fusion champion. Customers, initially drawn by the spectacle, chose sides with a partisan fervor usually reserved for sports teams. The city was divided into Team He and Team She, their allegiance declared by which truck's long line they were willing to endure on a Friday night. The legal letters began to fly. Her lawyers sent cease and desist orders over the stolen recipes. His lawyers sent countersuits accusing her of defamation and unfair competition. But the real battle was fought not in courtrooms, but in the marketplace of public opinion and on the streets. They would schedule their trucks at opposing ends of the same festival, creating a palpable tension in the air. They ran spiteful social media promotions. If he offered a breakup special, she would counter with a moving on discount. The animosity became its own brand, a bitter seasoning that customers seemed to savor. In the end, the feud probably made them both more successful than their original truck ever was, but the cost was a permanent public exhibition of their private collapse, a daily reminder that their greatest professional achievement was born from the ashes of their personal ruin. But if you thought a food truck feud could stir up local drama, imagine a scenario where a personal meltdown doesn't just make the local news, but risks destabilizing international relations. Our next story proves that when a breakup goes spectacularly wrong, the fallout can escalate from a private spat to a matter of state. This is the tale of the diplomatic incident, a masterclass in how to turn a broken heart into a global headache. The setting is the kind of event that drips with quiet power and unspoken protocol, a cocktail reception at a foreign embassy in Washington, D.C. The air is thick with the murmur of multiple languages, the clink of fine crystal, and the subtle rustle of elegant attire. For one American woman, let's call her Sarah, this world was both thrilling and familiar. She was the partner of a junior diplomat from a small European nation, and for 2 years she had been by his side, learning the intricate dance of international diplomacy. She knew how to make small talk with an ambassador, which fork to use for the salad, and the precise level of deference to show a visiting minister. She had, she believed, mastered the art of the diplomatic partner, always present, always polite, always maintaining the facade of perfect harmony for the good of her partner's career. But that facade was cracking. For months, she had suspected her partner was being less than faithful, using his frequent travel and late nights at the embassy as cover for a series of indiscretions. The evidence had mounted, and a tense, private confrontation in their apartment just hours before the reception had confirmed her worst fears. He had admitted to an affair with a cultural attaché from another mission. But instead of remorse, he offered her a chillingly pragmatic justification. He explained that in his world, such liaisons were understood. They were part of the unspoken currency of diplomacy, a way to build alliances and gather information. He told her she needed to be more sophisticated, to understand that their personal relationship was separate from his professional obligations. His cold, calculated dismissal of her pain was the final betrayal. He expected her to still attend the reception that evening, to continue playing her part in his carefully constructed fiction. And in that moment, something inside her snapped. She arrived at the embassy that night not as a gracious partner, but as a weapon. She wore a stunning, defiant red dress in a sea of muted navy and black. She maintained her composure through the initial pleasantries, a serene smile fixed on her face. The moment came when her partner was deep in conversation with his ambassador and a high-ranking official from the host country. It was the most important conversation of the evening, a chance to advocate for his nation's interests. Seeing her opening, Sarah glided over, a fresh glass of champagne in hand. She offered a charming smile to the group, then turned her full attention to the visiting official. "You must be so exhausted from your travels," she began, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "It's so difficult to get proper rest in a strange hotel, isn't it? My partner would know. He's been spending so many nights at the Hotel Montclair lately. Though I suppose it's not all work." She then turned her sweet, deadly smile directly to her stunned partner. "Isn't that right, darling? How is Anya, by the way? The cultural attaché from the trade mission. She must be just exhausted too." The effect was not a loud scene, but a profound and spreading silence. The ambassador's face froze. The visiting official took a subtle step back, his expression a mask of polite confusion laced with deep discomfort. Her partner's face drained of all color, a mixture of pure rage and abject terror. In a few expertly delivered sentences, she had not only exposed his affair but had done so in a way that implied he was potentially compromising sensitive information with a national from another government. She had weaponized the gossipy, paranoid atmosphere of the diplomatic corps itself. The carefully cultivated trust in that small circle evaporated instantly. The ambassador quickly excused himself and his junior diplomat, whisking him away for what was undoubtedly the most painful dressing down of his career. The repercussions were swift and severe. The next day, a formal complaint was lodged by the ambassador with the U.S. State Department. It wasn't about the affair itself, but about the unprofessional and disruptive conduct of a guest that had jeopardized a sensitive bilateral discussion. The complaint noted the deeply unfortunate and calculated attempt to undermine diplomatic communications. For a few tense days, the incident was a quiet but serious issue between the two nations, requiring delicate behind-the-scenes work by protocol officers to smooth over. While it never made the public newswires within the insular world of international diplomacy, it was the talk of the town. Sarah's partner was promptly recalled to his home capital, his promising career effectively torpedoed. He wasn't fired, but he was sidelined, given a dismal desk job processing paperwork, forever known as the man who couldn't control his personal life and, in doing so, embarrassed his entire country on a minor but symbolically significant stage. Sarah achieved her goal of a spectacular and final breakup, but the victory came with its own unexpected consequences. She found herself informally blacklisted from the diplomatic social circuit she had once enjoyed. Her name became a cautionary tale, a warning to other diplomats about the dangers of involving outsiders in their world. She had learned the rules of the game so well that she knew exactly how to break them for maximum damage, but in doing so, she ensured she could never play again. Her story is a stark lesson in unintended consequences, proving that when you choose to detonate a relationship in a room full of explosives, you shouldn't be surprised if you get caught in the blast. Now imagine a relationship built not just on love, but on a shared, exquisite taste, a world of gallery openings, whispered conversations about brushstrokes, and the quiet joy of building a private collection together. For one couple, let's call them Elena and Charles, their home was a living museum, a testament to a life beautifully curated. Over a decade, Charles, a financier with a deep appreciation for art, had gifted Elena numerous pieces, a hauntingly beautiful landscape for their first anniversary, a bold, modern sculpture for her 40th birthday, a small but priceless sketch by a renowned artist simply because it reminded him of the way she laughed. Each piece was more than an object, it was a bookmark in the story of their life, a physical manifestation of a moment in time. To the outside world, it was a collection. To them, it was a visual diary of their love. When that love crumbled, the collection became the most painful artifact of their life together. For Charles, every painting on the wall was a testament to a love he now felt was betrayed. He began to see the artworks not as heartfelt gifts, but as loans to a museum that had suddenly closed its doors. In the bitter fog of his heartbreak, a plan took shape, one he saw not as theft but as reclamation. He wasn't stealing, he was taking back what was rightfully his. He hired a discreet moving company, providing them with a detailed inventory and a set of keys to the now vacant house, which was awaiting sale. He presented himself as the sole owner, simply coordinating the transfer of his property to a new location. The movers, professional and efficient, arrived one afternoon and carefully, methodically, took every single piece he had ever given her off the walls, out of the display cases, and even unscrewed the sculptures from their bases. Elena's discovery was one of surreal, gut-wrenching violation. She had come to the house for one last walk through, to say a private goodbye to the space that held so many memories. She turned the key, stepped inside, and was met with a deafening visual silence. The walls weren't just bare, they were scarred by the faint outlines of where their life had once hung. The empty pedestals stood like tombstones. It wasn't a burglary, it was an erasure. Her home, her sanctuary, had been surgically stripped of its soul. The initial shock gave way to a cold, furious clarity. She knew instantly who was responsible. This wasn't random, it was personal. It was Charles, attempting to rewrite their history by literally taking it back piece by priceless piece. The legal battle that followed was a fascinating and brutal exploration of a deceptively simple question. What is a gift? Charles's legal team argued a cold, hard line. Under the law, a gift, once given, is the sole property of the recipient. The act of giving is final and irrevocable. He had purchased these items, he had the receipts to prove it, and the transfer of them to Elena was a completed gift. In his mind, and in the letter of property law, he was merely retrieving his own assets from a location to which she had temporarily had access. His argument was one of pure ownership, completely divorced from the emotional context in which these objects were exchanged. Elena's attorneys, however, fought on the battlefield of intent and custom. Their argument was more nuanced, rooted in the unspoken contract of a long-term relationship. They argued that these were not simple transfers of property like gifting someone a toaster. These were ceremonial gifts given to mark occasions, to celebrate a shared life. They were inherently tied to the relationship itself. To take them back was a violation of that social contract. Her legal team meticulously compiled evidence, anniversary cards where he'd written, "For our collection," emails discussing the pieces as ours, and testimonies from friends who witnessed the gifting as acts of love, not temporary loans. They painted a picture of a man who was trying to un-gift a decade of his life, to retroactively revoke his affection, and in doing so, inflict maximum emotional and financial harm. The case likely never saw a jury. It was probably settled in a tense, closed-door mediation. The outcome would have hinged on a painful cost-benefit analysis for Charles. While he might have had a superficially strong claim on paper, a public trial would have been a disaster for his reputation. A skilled prosecutor or a civil attorney could easily have made him look like a petulant, vindictive miser, a man who sued his ex-partner to get back her birthday presents. The negative publicity, especially in the tight-knit, gossipy world of high finance and art collecting, could have been more damaging than losing the art itself. The settlement would have involved a humiliating and expensive buyback of the collection from Elena, or a forced, awkward division of the pieces, turning their cherished visual diary into a simple list of assets to be haggled over. In the end, Charles may have won back some canvases and bronze, but he forever cemented his legacy not as a patron of the arts, but as the man who tried to repossess his own love story, proving that some gifts, once given, can never truly be taken back without destroying their value entirely. Most of us go to the gym for a personal escape, a place to zone out with headphones in and focus on nothing but the next rep. It's a sanctuary of self-improvement, a bubble of controlled chaos where the only thing anyone is really listening to is their own pounding heart. But for one man, that bubble was about to be popped in the most spectacularly public way imaginable, turning a place of private focus into the stage for a breakup announcement heard by everyone. The mastermind behind this public ambush was a woman we'll call Chloe. Her relationship with her boyfriend, Mark, had ended abruptly a week prior, and he had chosen the coward's way out, a vague, one-line text message before ghosting her completely. She was left with a swirling mix of heartbreak, rage, and unanswered questions. But Chloe had one advantage Mark hadn't considered. They had signed up for their gym memberships together, and in the chaotic hustle of the initial paperwork, he had added her as an authorized user on his account. This meant she could still scan her key fob and walk right in. The idea didn't come to her all at once. It started as a fantasy during a particularly angry treadmill session. She looked up at the gym's ceiling, noticed the small speakers, and wondered. A few discreet questions to a friendly staff member about how the managers paged people for phone calls gave her all the information she needed. The plan was insane, audacious, and perfect. She chose a prime time, a packed 7 p.m. slot on a Monday when the gym was filled with people trying to combat the week's existential dread with deadlifts. She walked in with a determined calm, scanning her fob with a smile at the front desk. She made her way not to the treadmills, but toward the manager's office, which she knew was often left unlocked during the evening rush. Her heart was hammering, but her focus was absolute. Seeing the office empty, she slipped inside. There, on the desk, was the simple microphone connected to the gym's entire loudspeaker system. She took a deep breath, pressed the button, and the gentle background music pumping through the gym suddenly cut out. Every head in the building instinctively lifted at the silence. And then her voice, crystal clear and dripping with a terrifyingly calm fury, echoed off every weight rack and yoga mat. Attention, Fitness Universe members. This is a public service announcement for Mark Stevens, currently failing to outrun his problems on treadmill number 6. Mark, since you ended our 3-year relationship last week via text message like a spineless coward, I figured I'd return the favor in a way you can actually hear. You forgot to remove me from your membership, so I'm using the last of your monthly fees to tell everyone here that you're a lying, cheating, pathologically avoidant man-child. Enjoy your workout, and guys, he's single. The silence that followed was louder than any drop of a weight. For a split second, the entire gym froze, a tableau of stunned faces mid-rep, mouths agape. Then a wave of nervous laughter, scattered applause, and 100 heads simultaneously turning to find treadmill number 6. There was Mark, fumbling desperately for the stop button on his machine, his face a spectacular canvas of purple humiliation, desperately trying to disappear into his own sweat towel as his entire personal life was broadcast to a room full of strangers. The gym's response was swift and severe. The manager, bright red with a mixture of second-hand embarrassment and professional fury, burst out of his office to find Chloe, who had already placed the microphone gently back on the desk. She was escorted from the premises immediately, but not before she got a glimpse of her ex, now surrounded by a perimeter of pitying and amused stares. The fallout was immediate. Mark's membership was terminated for the security breach tied to his account, though the gym, perhaps sensing the poetic justice of it all, allowed him to cancel without the standard penalty fee. Chloe, of course, was issued a lifetime ban and a formal trespass notice, but the real consequence was the social ricochet. The video of the announcement, recorded on a dozen phones, was all over local social media groups within the hour. Mark became a minor, infamous local celebrity, the treadmill coward. For Chloe, it was a moment of catharsis so powerful it likely cost her any chance of a peaceful gym session ever again, but she achieved what she wanted. In a world where breakups are so often suffered in silence, she made sure his was heard. Imagine investing years of your life into building a partnership, sharing a home, a bed, your most vulnerable secrets, and even a last name, only to discover that the very foundation of your union was a complete and utter fabrication. That's the devastating reality that crashed down on one unsuspecting partner, a woman we'll call Anna, in a story that redefines the concept of a bad breakup. For 5 years, she believed she was married to a man named Daniel. They had a beautiful wedding ceremony in a sun-dappled garden, surrounded by friends and family who toasted to their future. They filed joint tax returns, bought a house together, and made plans for a family. Daniel was a charming, seemingly stable man, though he did have a few quirks: a reluctance to get a new passport photo, a strange aversion to running into old acquaintances in certain parts of town. Anna wrote it off as social anxiety, little quirks that made him who he was. The truth, however, was far more sinister. The unraveling began with something as mundane as a life insurance application. To get a policy, Daniel needed a copy of his birth certificate. He kept putting it off, making excuses about lost paperwork and bureaucratic delays. Finally, Anna, ever the pragmatist, decided to surprise him. She went online to the Vital Records office of the state where he claimed to have been born and filled out the request form herself. Days later, an official envelope arrived. But when she opened it, her blood ran cold. The name on the certificate was different. The date of birth was off by 2 years. The parents' names were complete strangers. At first, she assumed it was a clerical error, a case of mistaken identity, but a sickening dread began to pool in her stomach. She confronted Daniel that evening, holding the damning document out with a trembling hand. His face didn't register confusion or surprise. It just went blank, a terrifying mask of calm resignation. And then he confessed his name wasn't Daniel. He wasn't from that state. The social security number he'd used for their marriage license, their mortgage, everything was not his own. The reasons for such an elaborate deception are as varied as they are chilling. Perhaps he was hiding from a criminal past, desperate to create a new identity to outrun old debts or charges. Maybe he was already married to someone else in another state, and this entire life was an elaborate second act, a bigamous fantasy made real through sheer audacity and a fake ID. Or perhaps most tragically, he might have been a man so burdened by the weight of his own past failures or insecurities that he saw stealing a new identity as the only way to become someone he believed was worthy of love. Whatever the motive, the impact on Anna was absolute emotional annihilation. In an instant, her entire reality was invalidated. Her marriage wasn't just over, it was retroactively void. It had never legally existed. She wasn't a divorcee. She was a single woman who had unknowingly shared her life with a complete stranger. The man she had loved, argued with, and planned a future with was a fictional character, and the actor was now walking away from the role. The breakup that followed was unlike any other. There was no division of assets through a divorce court because there was no legal marriage to dissolve. Instead, they were thrust into a bizarre and incredibly complex legal gray area. Their jointly owned house became a nightmare of title law. Their financial accounts, all opened under his stolen identity, were suddenly frozen and scrutinized for fraud. Anna found herself not just grieving, but having to prove to banks, the IRS, and credit agencies that she was an innocent victim of an elaborate scam, not a willing accomplice in identity fraud. Every piece of paperwork from the last 5 years was now a potentially fraudulent document, a reminder of the lie she had unknowingly built her life upon. The man she knew as Daniel simply vanished, likely to assume another name and begin the cycle again elsewhere, leaving Anna to spend years untangling the legal and emotional wreckage of a marriage that was, in the eyes of the law, nothing more than a very convincing piece of performance art. It's difficult to conceive of a line so sacred that even in the heat of a bitter breakup, most people would never dare to cross it. But for one individual, consumed by a rage that obliterated all sense of decency, That line wasn't just crossed, it was desecrated with a can of spray paint in the dead of night. This is the story of the cemetery vandal, a person so utterly broken by heartbreak that they sought to inflict pain not on the living but on the memory of the dead. The relationship had ended badly, as so many of these stories do. After a tumultuous final argument, he was left alone, replaying every perceived injustice, every moment of pain. The anger fermented in isolation, curdling from a sharp sting into a cold, calculating need for revenge. But what could he do? A shouting match felt insufficient. A nasty text message would be too easily ignored. He wanted his ex to feel a pain as deep and as permanent as the one he was feeling. And then the most horrific idea took root. He knew how deeply she revered her family, how every Sunday she would visit the local cemetery to leave flowers on her grandparents' graves. That small, peaceful plot of land was her touchstone, her connection to a history that defined her. To violate that space wouldn't just be an attack on her, it would be an attack on her entire lineage, on the very concept of her identity. Under the cover of a moonless night, he made his way to the cemetery, a single can of black spray paint clenched in his hand. The air was still and silent, the only sound the crunch of gravel under his feet. He found the familiar headstones, the names of her ancestors etched in granite. And there, in the profound quiet meant for reflection and peace, he unleashed his fury. He didn't just write a simple insult. He covered the stones in a torrent of vile, personal slurs, accusations, and crude drawings aimed not at the deceased, but at the living woman he felt had wronged him. The viscous paint dripped down the carved dates of birth and death, obscuring the tributes to lives fully lived, turning monuments of love into billboards for his hatred. It was an act of profound cowardice, a violation executed without a witness, meant to be discovered in the harsh light of day by the one person who would feel its impact most acutely. The discovery, as intended, was devastating. She arrived for her weekly visit, a small bouquet of fresh flowers in hand, only to be met with a sight that stole the breath from her lungs. Her family's final resting place, a place of comfort and solace, had been transformed into a nightmare. The initial shock was a physical blow, followed by a wave of nausea and a grief so fresh it felt like the deaths had just happened. This was more than property damage, it was a spiritual violation. The helplessness was overwhelming. How do you clean hate off a gravestone? How do you explain to the spirit of your beloved grandmother that her eternal rest has been disrupted by such venom? The pain of the breakup was instantly magnified 100-fold, eclipsed by a deeper, more existential hurt. The man she had once loved had now ensured that even her moments of private mourning would forever be haunted by the ghost of his malice. For the vandal, the fantasy of anonymous revenge was short-lived. Cemeteries, while peaceful, are often monitored. A routine patrol by a local sheriff's deputy the next morning discovered the damage immediately. The sheer brazenness of the act suggested it was personal, not random. The investigation was straightforward. Police simply reviewed the list of people recently interred in that section and began speaking to their surviving families. When they knocked on her door to ask if she knew anyone who might want to cause her this specific kind of harm, the answer, though heartbreaking, was clear. He was arrested within days, the can of spray paint now empty, found in his own garbage can, his fingerprints a perfect match to those left on the marble. The legal consequences were severe and layered. On the most basic level, he was charged with criminal vandalism and trespassing, but the location of the crime elevated the charges significantly. Many states have specific laws against desecrating a gravesite or vandalizing a cemetery, statutes that carry much heavier penalties than standard property crime laws. These laws recognize the unique emotional and cultural value of a burial ground, treating such acts not merely as damage to stone, but as an offense against the community and the sanctity of memory. He was looking at not just fines, but the very real possibility of jail time. Furthermore, the families whose graves were damaged had a powerful civil case against him for the intentional infliction of emotional distress. The cost of professionally restoring the headstones, a delicate process requiring specialists, would be astronomical, and a judge would have no sympathy for his broken heart when presented with a bill for thousands of dollars to clean the hatred off a war veteran's final marker. In the end, this story stands as one of the most stark examples of a revenge fantasy gone horribly wrong. He sought to hurt his ex in a way she would never forget, and he succeeded. But in doing so, he didn't just end a relationship. He permanently defined himself as the kind of person who would violate the dead to spite the living. His name is now attached to a police report and a court docket, a permanent public record of his moment of ultimate cowardice. He learned the hard way that some lines exist for a reason, and crossing them doesn't just break a heart, it can break a life. Of course, some acts of revenge aim to destroy a person's future, while others seek to hijack their very essence to become them in a bizarre and parasitic performance. This next story is a masterclass in identity theft, but not for financial gain. It was an act of emotional appropriation so convoluted it feels like a psychological thriller. Our subject, a man we'll call Leo, found himself on the receiving end of a breakup he never saw coming. His girlfriend, Sarah, ended things abruptly, leaving him reeling and confused. In the weeks that followed, he did his best to move on, throwing himself into work and leaning on friends. He eventually felt ready to dip a tentative toe back into the dating pool, creating a profile on a popular app. It was there he encountered Maya. Her profile was magnetic, witty, charming, and strikingly beautiful. They hit it off instantly. Their digital conversations were effortless, filled with inside jokes and a shared sense of humor that felt almost uncanny. She seemed to understand him on a level that was almost unsettling, anticipating his thoughts and referencing his favorite obscure bands and movies without him ever mentioning them. It felt like kismet, a connection so seamless it erased the pain of his previous relationship. What Leo couldn't possibly know was that the woman on the other side of the screen wasn't a stranger named Maya. It was his ex-girlfriend, Sarah. After ending their relationship, a toxic cocktail of regret, jealousy, and curiosity had consumed her. She found herself obsessively stalking his social media, desperate to know if he was moving on. When she saw he'd created a new dating profile, a twisted idea took root. She couldn't bear the thought of him with someone else, but she also knew she couldn't just ask for him back. So she decided to create the perfect woman for him, a woman who was in fact a Frankenstein's monster of everything she knew he loved, stitched together from her intimate knowledge of his desires. She crafted the Maya profile using photos of a distant acquaintance she knew he wouldn't recognize. She used his own humor, his passions, his vulnerabilities, all the things she'd learned over years together, as a blueprint to construct his ideal partner. She was essentially catfishing him with a refined, perfect version of herself. For weeks, the charade continued. Sarah, as Maya, would engage Leo in deep, meaningful conversations that reinforced how perfectly matched they were. She would then log out and, as herself, would have casual conversations with him, subtly probing for more information to feed the Maya persona. It was an exhausting, double-life operation fueled by a desperate need for control. The entire relationship was a hall of mirrors, with Sarah reflecting a distorted image of Leo's own preferences back at him. The emotional damage this inflicted was slow and insidious. Leo was falling in love with a phantom, a digital ghost programmed by his ex. His real-world interactions suffered because no one could possibly compete with the idealized perfection of Maya. He was being emotionally isolated by a fiction. The collapse was as inevitable as it was catastrophic. A tiny, forgotten detail was her undoing. Maya referenced a specific childhood anecdote Leo had only ever told Sarah during a private moment years ago. There was no way a stranger could know it. A cold dread washed over him. the uncanny feeling that had been nagging at him crystallized into a horrifying suspicion. He set a trap, mentioning a fake favorite book to Maya that he had never actually read. Within hours, she was enthusiastically discussing its themes with him. He then immediately texted Sarah, casually asking if she'd ever heard of that same fictitious book. Her response was a little too quick, a little too enthusiastic. "Oh my gosh, it's my absolute favorite." "You have to read it," the same exact phrasing Maya had used. The pieces snapped together with a sickening clarity. The perfect woman didn't exist. He had been having an intense emotional affair with his own ex-girlfriend. The confrontation was a nuclear detonation of trust. Leo's anger was not just about the lies, it was about the profound psychological violation. His most private self had been used as a script for his own manipulation. He felt exposed, foolish, and deeply betrayed. For Sarah, the jig was up, and the fallout was immediate and humiliating, but the damage extended beyond the two of them. The acquaintance whose photos were used in the fake profile was horrified to discover her image had been weaponized in such a personal and creepy scheme, and she faced her own uncomfortable explanations to mutual friends. Leo was left to untangle a devastating knot of emotions. He had to grieve the loss of Maya, a person who never existed, while simultaneously processing the renewed betrayal from Sarah. The experience left him with a lasting sense of paranoia, a difficulty trusting his own judgment in future relationships. How could he ever believe a connection was genuine again, when the most perfect one he'd ever known was a meticulously crafted lie? Sarah's attempt to keep a version of him close through deception ultimately ensured she would never be close to him again, poisoning the well of trust so thoroughly that not even a perfect fiction could ever clean it. After the dark, claustrophobic terror of being locked in a closet, our next breakup story takes the drama to the absolute opposite extreme, the wide open sky. This is the tale of a rejection so grand, so audaciously public, that it required a pilot, a plane, and enough money to buy a used car. Imagine it's a beautiful, cloudless Tuesday afternoon. You're at work, maybe taking a much-needed coffee break outside, enjoying a few moments of sunshine. You look up, squinting at the gentle hum of a small airplane tracing lazy circles high above. It's a common sight, often towing a banner for a local casino or a new car dealership. You watch, idly curious, as the first puffs of white smoke begin to trail from the plane. It's writing something. You, along with everyone else in your office park, tilt your heads back to read the message as it unfolds against the brilliant blue canvas. The first word appears, WE, then an apostrophe, RE, a pause as the plane banks for its next pass, and then the final, devastating word, THROUGH. We're through, and then, just to remove any and all doubt, a final, elegant flourish, your name. The silence on the ground is absolute for a single, breathtaking second. Then it's broken by a wave of gasps, followed by uncontrollable laughter. Co-workers who moments ago were discussing quarterly reports are now pointing at the sky and then at you, their faces a mixture of shock and absolute delight. Your face floods with a heat so intense it feels like a sunburn. In that moment, your entire personal life has been written in the sky for your boss, your colleagues, your rivals, and the entire city to see. There is no hiding, no denying, no private conversation. Your relationship is over, and the proof is vaporizing slowly above your head, a temporary but unforgettable monument to your humiliation. The logistics of such a spectacularly petty act are as fascinating as they are expensive. This isn't a decision made in a fleeting moment of anger. This is a premeditated, financially significant act of war. The person who commissions this, let's call him Mark, had to cold call skywriting companies, get quotes, and book a time slot. The average cost for a short, simple message like this can easily run into the thousands of dollars. He had to provide the exact wording, the specific location, likely providing the address of his ex's workplace and the best time to ensure maximum audience exposure, and then approve the final plan. This was a calculated investment in public shaming, a line item in his budget for revenge. He wasn't just heartbroken, he was a producer, a director, and a financier, orchestrating the most public breakup imaginable. The motivation here is a complex cocktail of pain, performative anger, and a desperate need for the last word. For Mark, a simple text message or a phone call clearly wasn't enough. He needed his message to be unavoidable, to land with an impact that could never be ignored or deleted. He wanted to ensure that his ex, let's call her Chloe, would have to face the end of their relationship not in the quiet of her home, but in the most public arena of her life, her professional environment. It was a power move designed to strip her of any control over the narrative. She couldn't soften the blow for herself or tell her friends in her own time. The news was delivered to her and everyone she knew simultaneously by a biplane. It was the ultimate mic drop delivered from 5,000 feet. For Chloe, the aftermath is a uniquely 21st century nightmare. Even before the last letter of her name has dissipated, smartphones are out. The sky is being recorded from a dozen different angles. Within minutes, the video is on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. She's tagged by helpful acquaintances. The story is picked up by local news outlets looking for a bit of light-hearted content. Her professional reputation, once built on her competence and work ethic, is now temporarily overshadowed by this bizarre personal circus. For weeks, maybe months, she is known as the skywriting girl at the office. Every new person she meets might have seen the clip online. The breakup itself becomes a trivial footnote compared to the spectacle of its announcement. Mark's expensive stunt didn't just end a relationship, it turned its conclusion into a public meme, ensuring the pain of the split would be remembered not for what it was, but for how absurdly it was delivered. Imagine the pressure cooker environment of a high-stakes tech startup, where every line of code is a potential goldmine, and the difference between dominance and obscurity is a single trade secret. For Liam and Chloe, their relationship was the one stable thing in that chaotic world. They worked for rival companies in the same cutting-edge field of artificial intelligence, a fact they initially joked about, calling their pillow talk off-the-record intel sharing. They built a careful wall between their work and personal lives, a silent agreement that what happened at the office stayed at the office. Their love was their sanctuary from the corporate warfare. But when that sanctuary crumbled, the wall didn't just come down, it was weaponized. The breakup was triggered by the very thing that defined their world, ambition. Chloe's company was on the verge of a breakthrough, and the insane hours she was working left Liam feeling neglected and resentful. A final, bitter argument revealed a deep-seated jealousy he'd been harboring. He accused her of caring more about her algorithms than their relationship, of choosing her company's success over their future. In his mind, her dedication wasn't admirable, it was a personal rejection. The rejection curdled into a cold, calculated desire for revenge. He didn't just want to hurt her emotionally, he wanted to destroy the very thing she loved more than him, her professional triumph. His plan was terrifying in its simplicity and its abuse of intimacy. During a weekend visit to her apartment shortly before the split, under the guise of grabbing a forgotten phone charger, he performed a maneuver known as an evil-made attack on her personal laptop. He used a small, innocuous-looking device to clone her entire hard drive in a matter of minutes, capturing every file, every email, every cached password. He now had a digital copy of her professional life. In the weeks following their ugly split, as he stewed in his anger, he began to sift through the stolen data. He wasn't a hacker, he was a jilted lover with a key to the castle. He found what he was looking for: early drafts of a proprietary neural network design, internal emails discussing its revolutionary potential, and detailed notes on the project's core architecture, the crown jewels of her company's research. The transfer itself was almost insultingly easy. Using a fake email account and a public Wi-Fi network, he anonymously packaged the most critical files and sent them directly to the CEO of his own company. He didn't ask for money, his currency was vindication. His note was brief and venomous, a gift from a disillusioned insider. Maybe your team can put it to better use than they did. For Liam, this was the ultimate checkmate. He would cripple her project, make her look incompetent or, even better, like the one who had leaked the secrets, thereby elevating his own status at his rival firm. He saw it as a brilliant corporate play, completely divorcing the act from its deeply personal criminal origins. The discovery at Chloe's company was swift and terrifying. Their internal security systems flagged the nearly identical, premature development of the same technology by their direct competitor. A digital forensic team was brought in, and the audit trail, while carefully covered, was not perfect. The metadata on the leaked files pointed back to Chloe's machine. For a horrifying few days, she was the prime suspect, suspended while investigators tore her digital life apart. Her professional reputation, built over years of brilliant work, was instantly vaporized. The emotional devastation was twofold. The grief of the breakup was now compounded by the terror of being accused of a career-ending crime. Her salvation came from an unlikely place, his arrogance. During the internal investigation, a sharp-eyed IT specialist noticed that the data exfiltration had occurred during a time when Chloe's laptop was logged as being physically present in her apartment, but her keycard access showed she was actually across town at a yoga class. This discrepancy pointed not to her, but to someone who had physical access to her machine. The evidence narrowed the window of opportunity to a very short list of people, with a recent ex-boyfriend and known corporate rival sitting squarely at the top. A warrant for his digital history revealed the fake email account, the public Wi-Fi usage from a location near his home, and a series of searches on his personal computer for terms like data cloning and untraceable file transfer made in the days following their breakup. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic, extending far beyond their broken hearts. Liam was arrested at his office in a stunning, very public spectacle that sent shockwaves through the entire industry. He was charged under the Economic Espionage Act, a federal statute that carries severe penalties for the theft of trade secrets. His company, desperate to distance itself from the scandal, immediately fired him and launched its own internal investigation, but the damage was done. They were slapped with massive lawsuits from Chloe's company for unfair competition and unjust enrichment, suits they were almost certain to lose given the criminal conviction of their employee. The legal fees alone would be staggering, and their reputation was permanently tarnished by the affair. For Liam, the price of his revenge was a lifetime of consequences. A federal conviction meant not just the possibility of a long prison sentence, but a permanent loss of certain civil rights and a future where any kind of trusted employment would be impossible. He had traded a broken heart for a felony record. For Chloe, while she was ultimately vindicated, the victory was hollow. The trust she had in her own judgment was shattered. The industry now knew her as the woman whose boyfriend stole her work, a footnote in her own story she could never escape. Their tale is a stark warning about the dangers of mixing love and corporate rivalry, proving that when a relationship becomes a battlefield, the collateral damage can destroy far more than just two hearts. It can dismantle careers, companies, and entire futures in its wake. But if you thought corporate espionage was a high-stakes way to escape a relationship, our next story involves a getaway vehicle of an entirely different sort, one that doesn't lead to a tropical island or a new city, but to a Chinese letter, all-consuming belief system. This is the bizarre tale of a man who didn't just leave his partner, he attempted to vanish into the ranks of a religious cult, only to discover that his exit strategy had a twist he never saw coming. The relationship, by all accounts, was intensely suffocating. Mark felt controlled, micromanaged, and emotionally drained, living under the constant weight of his partner's expectations. The desire to escape wasn't just a wish, it was a physical need for air. But how do you disappear from someone who knows all your friends, your family, and your routines? A normal breakup would involve conversations, negotiations, and likely a prolonged period of emotional warfare he felt utterly unequipped to handle. In his panicked state, he began to see a radical solution. He wouldn't just break up, he would cease to exist as the person she knew. He began researching groups online that offered total immersion and separation from one's past life. He wasn't looking for spirituality, he was looking for a witness protection program for the heart. He found it in a fringe religious group that promised a new family, a new purpose, and a complete severance from the burdens of his old world. It seemed like the perfect escape hatch. The recruitment process was shockingly easy. He filled out an online form, and within days, he was on a conference call with incredibly warm, welcoming people who listened to his struggles without judgment. They didn't preach, they sympathized. They offered him a bed in their communal living facility and a role in their mission. It was the ultimate rejection of his current life. He didn't just want to leave his girlfriend, he wanted to invalidate the entire world she existed in. Joining the cult wasn't a spiritual awakening, it was the most dramatic form of ghosting imaginable. He packed a single bag, left a note that said only, "I have found my true path, do not look for me," and drove to the group's compound, believing he had finally executed the perfect, inaugural exit. For a few weeks it worked. He was cut off from phones and the internet, assigned manual labor, and immersed in a rigorous schedule of study and meditation designed to break down his individual identity. He was becoming a new person just as he'd wanted, but the cult had its own agenda, one far more ambitious than providing a refuge for heartbroken men. Their growth strategy was aggressively proactive. During one of their indoctrination sessions, a leader pressed him for details about his past life, framing it as a necessary step to purge his old demons. In a vulnerable state, he spoke about his ex-girlfriend, Sarah, describing her as a strong-willed, successful, but ultimately lost soul. Exactly the kind of high-functioning professional the cult prized as a new member. They saw her not as a person from his past, but as a potential asset for their future. Several weeks after his disappearance, Sarah was finally beginning to accept the bizarre reality that her boyfriend had joined a cult. She was cycling through anger, confusion, and grief when her doorbell rang. Expecting a food delivery, she opened the door to find two beaming, unnervingly calm individuals dressed in modest, simple clothing. They introduced themselves as brothers and sisters from the path of divine light and said they were there because someone who cared for her deeply wanted to share the peace and purpose he had found. They handed her a letter. It was in Mark's handwriting, but the language was stilted and formal, praising the community and urging her to attend an introductory retreat to free herself from the shackles of her materialistic life. Her initial shock gave way to a surreal, boiling fury. His grand act of abandonment had somehow looped back around to her doorstep. He hadn't just left her, his new family was now trying to recruit her. The cult's persistence was a masterclass in manipulative outreach. They began a gentle but relentless campaign. They called her not to discuss Mark, but to inquire about her own spiritual well-being. They left pamphlets on her car windshield. They showed up at her gym, having clearly researched her routines, and struck up seemingly casual conversations about mindfulness. They were leveraging the lingering emotional connection and confusion of the breakup as a tool for conversion. For Sarah, it was a special kind of psychological torture. The man had used a cult to reject her, and now the cult was using his rejection to try and absorb her. It was a horrifying feedback loop of control. The experience forced her to take drastic measures she never anticipated. She had to change her phone number and get a post office box to stop the mail. She had to alert her building's security to turn away the friendly visitors. She even consulted with a non-profit organization that specializes in helping families extract loved ones from cults. Only in her case, she was the target because of a loved one who had already been captured. The ultimate irony was staggering. Mark's attempt to utterly erase her from his life had instead guaranteed she would be haunted by his choices for months, turning her own home into a place of anxiety where any knock at the door could be another smiling evangelist for the life he had chosen over her. His search for the ultimate escape had backfired spectacularly, proving that even when you try to vanish off the face of the earth, the shadows of a broken relationship have a strange way of finding you again. For a creative duo, the songwriting process can be the most intimate part of a relationship, a sacred space where two people build something beautiful out of raw emotion and shared vulnerability. For the singer-songwriter couple we'll call Ilara and Finn, this was their entire world. They were a perfect harmonic balance, her haunting, crystalline voice paired with his genius for intricate, soulful melodies. For years, they were inseparable, writing hundreds of songs together in a small apartment cluttered with guitar picks and notebooks filled with scribbled lyrics. Their creative and romantic lives were a single, intertwined thread. A love song couldn't be written without it being about them, and a fight couldn't happen without it eventually becoming a bridge in a new track. Their identities were completely fused within their art. When the relationship finally shattered, it wasn't over a dramatic event like infidelity, but from the slow, erosive pressure of competing ambitions and creative differences. The split was acrimonious, filled with accusations about who contributed more to which song, who deserved the bigger share of their meager royalties, and whose vision was truly driving their sound. In the bitter aftermath, as they divided their physical possessions, the vintage microphone, the shared record collection, Ilara made a cold calculation. She believed with a ferocious and wounded certainty that the songs were more hers than his, that his melodies were nothing without her words and her voice. And so, during their final day in the shared apartment, while Finn was at work, she didn't just pack her clothes, she went straight for the hard drives and the notebooks. She took every single demo, every rough recording, every scrap of paper with a lyric fragment. She didn't see it as theft. In her mind, it was a reclamation of her own life's work, a rescue mission for the art she felt he was holding hostage. Alone and enraged, she embarked on a mission of erasure. She spent months in a professional studio, meticulously re-recording all their old demos. She worked with producers to slightly alter arrangements, enough to create a thin veneer of change, but the heart of every song, the melody, the lyrics, the core emotional hook remained unmistakably the work of two people. She then launched her solo career with a devastating efficiency, releasing the album as a deeply personal breakup record, a narrative of a strong woman finally finding her own voice after leaving a stifling partnership. The music was too good, the story too compelling. Critics adored it. The lead single climbed the charts. Suddenly, Ilara was everywhere, on magazine covers, late-night talk shows, her face the picture of hard-won artistic triumph. Finn's discovery was a special kind of hell. He heard his own life, his own heartache, his own musical phrases coming out of his car radio, sung in the voice of the woman who had broken his heart. The betrayal was so complete it was disorienting. These weren't just songs, they were their children, the auditory children they had created together. Hearing them presented as her sole creation was a violation that felt almost supernatural. He wasn't just angry, he was grief-stricken. His first move wasn't to a lawyer, but to their old friends, their tight-knit community of fellow musicians who had watched them write these songs in living rooms and backstage at tiny clubs. He expected outrage and immediate support, but the industry is a fickle beast and Ilara's star was now shining brightly. Some friends, fearing her newfound influence, quietly distanced themselves from Finn, offering vague excuses. Others, perhaps believing her narrative or simply wanting to avoid the drama, remained studiously neutral. The silence from people he considered brothers and sisters was a second profound betrayal. The legal battle that ensued was a brutal public spectacle that dissected the very nature of authorship. In court, it became a war of attrition over minutiae. Ilara's legal team argued that since she was the vocalist and often the one to physically write down the lyrics, her contribution was the defining, copyrightable element. Finn's team presented a mountain of evidence: text messages discussing chord progressions, early voice memos of him humming melodies that would later become iconic hooks, and testimony from sound engineers who had witnessed their truly collaborative process. The case hinged on the legal concept of a joint work, where two or more authors intend to merge their contributions into inseparable parts of a whole. The judge and jury were tasked with an almost impossible job: to quantify the unquantifiable magic of collaboration. In the end, after years of litigation that drained both their finances and their spirits, a settlement was reached. Finn likely won a co-writing credit and a share of the royalties on the stolen songs, a victory that felt like ashes in his mouth. The money could never compensate for the loss of his artistic legacy or the brutalization of his trust. For Ilara, she got to keep her fame, but it was forever tainted. Every time she performed those songs, she wasn't just singing about a past love, she was performing her own crime. The music industry might have accepted her, but a segment of it would always know her as the woman who built her throne on a lie, who loved her art so much she was willing to destroy the very person who helped her create it. Their story is a haunting refrain about the dark side of artistic partnership, where the desire for sole ownership of a shared dream can poison the music itself, leaving both parties forever singing the blues. There is perhaps no gesture more hopeful, more fundamentally optimistic about the future of a relationship than the creation of a time capsule. It is a physical act of faith, a promise whispered not just to each other, but to the versions of yourselves you believe you will become. For one couple, let's call them Maya and Ben, this ritual was the cornerstone of their love. On their first anniversary, they spent an entire weekend carefully selecting items that represented the pristine, early perfection of their union. There was the cork from the bottle of champagne they'd shared on their first date, the ticket stubs from a concert where they'd screamed the lyrics to their song, and a stack of handwritten love letters so heartfelt they felt almost too private to commit to paper. They packed these treasures into a sturdy, waterproof lockbox, drove to their favorite hiking trail, and under the dappled light of a majestic oak tree, they buried it. They made a solemn pact to return together in 10 years on their 11th anniversary, to dig it up and marvel at how far they'd come. It was a beautiful, living monument to their us. When the relationship ended 5 years later, the time capsule was the one thing they never discussed. In the painful division of books and kitchenware, it remained in the ground, a silent, unclaimed relic of a shared country that no longer existed. For Maya, the memory of the capsule was a bittersweet ache, a reminder of a love that was real even if it wasn't everlasting. She assumed it would stay there, slowly becoming part of the forest floor, a secret known only to the two of them and the tree that stood guard. She had made peace with its existence as a beautiful artifact of a closed chapter. Ben, however, saw it not as a sacred artifact but as an untouched asset. In the bitter aftermath of the split, he found himself struggling financially. Staring at his bills, his mind didn't drift to the sentimental value of their buried promises, it calculated. He remembered the vintage concert tees they'd included, the limited edition vinyl record, the silver locket he'd given her. He realized that the very specificity that made the capsule so personal, the unique date-stamped mementos, also made it highly desirable to a very specific online market, collectors of nostalgia. In a chilling act of moral bankruptcy, he drove back to the trail alone. With a shovel and the precise coordinates still saved in his phone, he unearthed the box. He didn't open it there amongst the trees where they'd buried it. He waited until he was home, where he could carefully inventory its contents under the cold, clinical light of his desk lamp. The act of selling wasn't a hurried, shameful dump onto a random auction site. It was a deliberate, curated exhibition. he created a dedicated online storefront cleverly named A Collection of Former Futures and began listing each item individually. He didn't just post photos, he wrote descriptions. He shared snippets of the stories behind the objects, but he stripped them of their true emotional weight, repackaging their intimacy as a charming sales pitch. Vintage concert tee, unworn from the night we met, he'd write, turning a seismic life event into a product condition. Heartfelt love letter, dated spring 2017, perfect for a unique art project or collection. He was auctioning off their most vulnerable moments to the highest bidder, turning their private language into public commodity. Maya's discovery was a uniquely 21st century horror. A friend of a friend, an avid online collector of oddities, stumbled upon the store. Recognizing Maya's name from the stories in the descriptions, she sent a screenshot with a message that simply read, "Is this you?" The world tilted on its axis, seeing a photo of her own heartfelt letter, held up by a stranger's hand against a generic background, was a violation that felt almost spiritual. It was one thing for a relationship to end. It was another to have its ghost paraded online for profit. The grief was instantly fresh, but now it was mixed with a nauseating sense of exposure. Her most private words, the raw and unedited proof of her love, were now being scrutinized, judged, and purchased by strangers as curiosities. The legal recourse was frustratingly narrow. The items in the box were, in the cold eyes of property law, likely considered gifts at the time they were given. Once buried together, they entered a strange gray area, but without a written agreement stipulating their joint ownership or intended future, a court would be reluctant to get involved in what it would see as a lover's quarrel. A lawyer would tell her that while his actions were morally reprehensible, they were likely not illegal. Her power wasn't in the courtroom, it was in the court of public opinion and the very platform he used. She launched a counter-campaign, reporting every listing to the website for the sale of deeply personal, non-consensual intimate materials. She emailed the collectors who had already purchased items, explaining the true, painful story behind the objects they now owned. Some were horrified and offered to return them. Others, to her dismay, saw the scandal only as increasing the item's rarity and value. The time capsule betrayal stands as one of the most profound violations because it doesn't just steal from the present or the past, it plunders the future that was promised. It takes a moment of pure, unfiltered hope and cynically commodities it. Ben didn't just dig up a box, he desecrated a shared altar to optimism, proving that for some, no memory is so sacred that it can't be priced. Maya was left with the haunting knowledge that pieces of her heart were now scattered across the country, displayed on shelves or tucked away in boxes owned by people who would never know their true weight. A permanent, distributed monument to a trust that was not just broken, but sold off piece by piece. What happens when a personal disagreement becomes so entangled with a political moment that you can no longer tell where one ends and the other begins? This next story takes us into the heart of a crowded city square, pulsating with the energy of a massive political rally. The air is thick with chants, the smell of street food, and a palpable sense of shared purpose. In the midst of it all are Alex and Sam, a couple whose relationship has been straining under the weight of their differing political intensities. They'd come to the protest together, a last-ditch effort to find common ground, but the fissures were already too deep. Sam was a passionate idealist, seeing the protest as a vital stand for justice, while Alex was increasingly skeptical, concerned about the movement's methods and what they saw as its counterproductive anger. They were having a heated but private argument on the periphery of the crowd, their voices rising to be heard over the din. The local news crew scanning the crowd for compelling human interest footage saw not a couple in distress but two engaged, passionate activists. A producer, mistaking their personal conflict for a political debate, quickly waved them over, offering them a chance to speak on a live microphone for a brief interview. Sam, eager to share their message, immediately agreed. Alex, hesitant and uncomfortable, was pulled along by the momentum. The reporter, holding the microphone between them, asked a simple question about what had brought them out to protest that day. Sam launched into a powerful, eloquent statement of their beliefs, their voice ringing out clear and strong. Then the reporter turned to Alex. Instead of offering a supporting viewpoint or even a gentle counterargument, Alex saw a chance to finally win the argument that had been raging for weeks. Looking directly into the camera, they began to speak not to the reporter but to Sam. What came out wasn't a political opinion but a deeply personal denouncement disguised as one. "I'm here because I once believed in the person standing next to me," Alex began, their voice cold and sharp. "But I can't stand with a movement or a person whose idea of change is just performative anger. You talk about building a better world, but you've built a wall between us with your self-righteousness. You care more about your placard than our partnership." The words hung in the air for a second before the roaring crowd around them seemed to gasp in unison. The live broadcast was capturing a breakup, not a protest soundbite. Sam's face, initially proud, crumpled into a mask of utter betrayal and humiliation. The most intimate collapse of their relationship was now playing out on a local news channel, their private grievances amplified for an audience of thousands. In that single, devastating moment, Alex had done the unthinkable. They had weaponized a political platform to deliver a personal blow, hijacking a movement's microphone to settle a private score. The protest for everyone else was about a larger cause. For Alex, it had become the stage for the ultimate mic drop on their own relationship. The crowd's reaction was immediate and divisive. Some cheered, misinterpreting the raw anger as a bold political stance against the movement's tactics. Others booed, horrified at the brutal public evisceration of what should have been a private matter. The couple was instantly surrounded, no longer two people in a relationship, but symbols in a larger cultural argument they never intended to have. The aftermath was a uniquely modern form of social hell. The clip was, of course, ripped from the news broadcast and went viral within hours. They were both tagged endlessly on social media, but for completely different reasons. Alex was hailed as a brave truth teller by one side and vilified as a cruel, heartless monster by the other. Sam was painted as either a hypocritical ideologue or a sympathetic victim of a spectacularly public betrayal. Their real, complex relationship was flattened into a simplistic political meme, a weapon for strangers to use in their own online arguments. They couldn't even grieve the end of their love in peace. Every text from a friend, every comment on a post was a reminder that their pain was now public property. The breakup itself was almost secondary to the unbearable weight of becoming unwilling symbols, their hearts broken not just by each other, but by the entire internet choosing sides in a war they never wanted to fight. But if weaponizing a political movement was a public spectacle, our next story shows how private vengeance can unleash a very different kind of chaos, one that threatens the most vulnerable creatures of all. This is the profoundly damaging tale of the animal sanctuary sabotage, a campaign of lies that weaponized public compassion to wound a former partner, with innocent lives caught in the crossfire. The sanctuary was more than a non-profit. It was a testament to a lifelong dream finally realized. After years of saving and planning, a woman we'll call Sarah had turned a modest plot of land into a safe haven for abandoned and abused farm animals. It was a place of healing, filled with the gentle sounds of contented creatures, a three-legged goat named Barnaby, a blind sheep called Macy, and a pig named Persephone who followed Sarah everywhere. Her entire existence was dedicated to their care, funded by her own savings and the generous donations of a supportive community that believed in her mission. Her relationship with a man named Leo had blossomed in this environment. He'd been drawn to her passion and had initially seemed to share her commitment, helping with repairs and fundraising events. But when their relationship soured, his admiration curdled into a toxic resentment. He couldn't stand that her devotion to the animals eclipsed her attention to him, and in his mind her passion looked more like an obsession. The sanctuary wasn't her life's work, it was his rival. His revenge was not a crime of passion, but a cold, calculated strategy designed to strike at the very heart of her existence. He didn't steal from her or vandalize the property. Instead, he crafted a far more insidious weapon, a narrative. From the anonymous safety of a new email account and fake social media profiles, he began a whispering campaign. He wrote elaborate, fabricated reviews on the sanctuary's social media pages, posing as a horrified former volunteer. He claimed to have witnessed neglected animals, filthy living conditions, and donations being misused for Sarah's personal gain. The lies were carefully constructed to echo real-world concerns of animal welfare advocates, making them sound plausible to an outside observer. He didn't just post once, he was relentless, seeding these falsehoods across local community groups, pet forums, and even the comment sections of news articles about local charities. The impact was immediate and devastating. In the world of animal rescue, reputation is everything. It is the currency of trust that convinces people to open their wallets and their hearts. The first sign of trouble was a sudden, sharp drop in monthly donations. Then, the emails began to arrive angry, accusatory messages from strangers demanding answers for the suffering they'd read about. But the most terrifying development was the official letter from the county's Animal Welfare Department, announcing a formal investigation based on multiple anonymous complaints. For Sarah, this was the ultimate nightmare. The investigators, while professional, had to treat every claim with seriousness. Their presence alone was a trauma as they poked and prodded through her barns and financial records, their very presence a violation of the sanctuary's sacred peace. The animals, sensitive to stress, became anxious and withdrawn. While Sarah was scrambling to provide vet records, clean bills of health, and bank statements to prove her innocence, Leo was watching the chaos unfold online with satisfaction. He had effectively hijacked the community's compassion and turned it into a weapon. The donations that dried up meant less feed, delayed vet appointments, and the heartbreaking decision to temporarily pause rescuing new animals in need. The real victims of his lies weren't in his inbox, they were in the barn, unknowingly facing a reduction in their quality of care because of a manufactured scandal. The emotional toll on Sarah was crushing. She was forced to spend her time, energy, and limited funds on legal consultations and public relations firefighting instead of animal care. Every moment spent crafting a response to a hateful comment was a moment not spent with the creatures who depended on her. Her salvation, ultimately, came from the very community he tried to poison. Long-time volunteers and major donors who knew Sarah's character and had witnessed her tireless work first and rallied around her. They launched a counter-campaign of their own, sharing videos and testimonials that showcased the sanctuary's impeccable conditions and the animals' obvious well-being. They exposed the inconsistencies in the anonymous posts, noting the sudden flurry of complaints from brand-new accounts. The investigation, as she knew it would, concluded with a full exoneration and a public statement affirming the sanctuary's high standards of care. But the damage was lasting. The stain of the accusations, however false, never fully disappeared from the darker corners of the internet. Future donors would occasionally still ask about those rumors, forcing her to relive the betrayal. Leo's revenge succeeded in causing immense financial and emotional strain, proving that the most destructive lies aren't always shouted. Sometimes they are whispered, and it is the innocent who are forced to pay the heaviest price. But if you thought political protests and animal sanctuaries were unexpected stages for a breakup, our final story proves that some people will commandeer any available platform, even one that's meant to be a portal to the past. This is the tale of the historical reenactment disaster, a meticulously planned ambush where a relationship was executed with the same precision as a military maneuver, witnessed by an audience that paid for a show but got a front row seat to a personal execution. Picture the scene, a sprawling, sun-drenched field meticulously transformed into a 19th-century battlefield. The air is thick with the smell of black powder, the sound of fife and drum, and the murmured excitement of hundreds of spectators lining the rope cordons. For the dedicated participants of this Civil War reenactment group, this is the pinnacle of their year, a sacred commitment to historical accuracy and living history. Among them is a couple we'll call Clara and Benjamin. To the outside world, they are the regiment's perfect union, a devoted pair whose shared passion for history is the bedrock of their relationship. They've spent countless hours together, hand-stitching their wool uniforms, polishing their brass buttons, and studying the personal letters of soldiers to perfect their first-person impressions. Their entire social life revolves around this community. Their friends are here, their identity is here, but behind the authentic canvas tents, the relationship has been under a quiet siege for months. The very intensity that bound them together, the obsession with detail, the pressure to perform their roles flawlessly, has become a source of constant, simmering tension. Every missed stitch on a haversack, every botched historical fact in conversation, has been weaponized in private arguments. Benjamin feels controlled and micromanaged. Clara feels unsupported and criticized. The pressure cooker environment of the big reenactment, with its long hours and intense focus, becomes the final straw. Benjamin has reached his breaking point, but rather than have a private conversation, he sees the gathered crowd not as spectators but as an audience. He decides that if their entire relationship has felt like a performance, then its finale should be worthy of a standing ovation. The battle reaches its scripted climax. The Union lines are advancing, and Benjamin's Confederate unit is ordered to make a valiant but ultimately doomed last stand. As the officer calls for a volley, the lines of men raise their muskets. The command to fire rings out, and a thunderous crack echoes across the field, followed by the thick, acrid smoke of black powder. According to the script, the Union soldiers should dramatically fall. But Benjamin, in that split second, makes a choice that shatters the fourth wall of history. He subtly adjusts his aim. He doesn't fire into the advancing line. He turns his weapon slightly and fires directly at Clara, who is standing proudly with her unit just yards away. The blank round, while not lethal, is still a powerful blast of concussive force and burning powder at close range. The impact is physically shocking. But the real injury is what comes next, as Clara stumbles backward, more from the shock of the betrayal than the force itself. Her face a mask of confusion and pain. Benjamin breaks character completely. He drops his musket, takes a step forward, and in a voice loud enough to carry over the suddenly silent field, he delivers his lines not from a 19th century soldier's manual, but from a 21st century breakup playbook. That's for every time you criticized my uniform, and consider that our last stand, we're through. The silence that follows is absolute, broken only by the distant call of a bird and the sputtering of a spectator's video camera. The illusion of the past is vaporized, replaced by the brutally awkward reality of a very public, very modern relationship meltdown. The fallout is immediate and multifaceted. For the event organizers, this is an unprecedented catastrophe. A sacred trust with the audience has been violated. The immersive experience they worked for a year to create has been wrecked by a personal squabble. Benjamin is immediately and permanently banned from the organization, his name becoming a curse word among reenactors. For Clara, the humiliation is layered. There is the personal betrayal, yes, but there is also a profound professional and social exile within her most important community. She is now the subject of pitying looks and whispered gossip, the woman who was literally shot down by her own partner. Their mutual friends are forced to choose sides, fracturing the tight-knit regiment. And for the bewildered spectators, they got a story far stranger than any history lesson, a viral video of a Civil War breakup that would live on online forever, ensuring that the most embarrassing moment of Clara and Benjamin's lives would be preserved and replayed for the amusement of strangers, a permanent digital monument to a relationship that ended not with a whisper but with a very loud, very public bang. And so we reach the end of our journey through the wild, unpredictable, and often jaw-dropping landscape of the American breakup. From the cold, impersonal shock of a divorce notice hidden in the classifieds to the sky-high dramatics of a message written in smoke, we've seen the full, spectacular spectrum of how a heart can break and how a person can break bad. We've witnessed the calculated cruelty of stolen heirlooms and desecrated graves, the bizarre creativity of alien abduction excuses and voodoo doll vendettas, and the epic, life-altering fallout of corporate espionage and identity theft played out on the most intimate of stages. These aren't just stories of relationships ending. They are testaments to the incredible, sometimes terrifying, lengths people will go to when love curdles into something else entirely, be it vengeance, performance art, or a desperate, flailing attempt to regain control. What ties these 33 tales together beyond their sheer weirdness is a raw, unfiltered look into the human condition under emotional duress. A breakup can feel like the end of the world, and as we've seen, some people respond by trying to burn the whole thing down with them. They reveal our deepest insecurities, our most creative impulses, and our profound capacity for both pettiness and pain. They show us that there is no script for heartbreak, no rulebook for how to behave when the foundation of your world suddenly gives way. In the absence of that guide, some people reach for a lawyer, some for a spray paint can, and some for a microphone at a political rally, all searching for a way to make their pain visible, to have the final word, or to simply feel something other than the crushing weight of loss. Yet, for all the chaos and sometimes legitimate harm these stories contain, there's a thread of dark humor that runs through them, a recognition of the sheer, absurd audacity of the human spirit. There's something perversely admirable about the commitment to a bit, whether it's renting a billboard or training actors to haunt your ex's open house. These stories remind us that while breaking up is hard to do, it's rarely boring. They are cautionary tales, yes, but they are also oddly life-affirming. They prove that even in our darkest moments, we are capable of breathtaking creativity, misguided though it may be. But this collection is far from complete. The American tapestry of love and loss is endlessly woven with new, bizarre threads every single day. So now we turn the microphone over to you. What's the weirdest way your heart has been broken, or the most outrageous way you've seen someone call it quits? The comment section below is waiting for your stories of public spectacles, strange excuses, and creative acts of revenge. Let's keep this bizarre conversation going. And if you've enjoyed this deep dive into the strangest corners of the human experience, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We're just getting started exploring the unbelievable, the shocking, and the utterly fascinating stories that make up this country.